Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill on a Monday, the day after the Eagles season have been officially eliminated from the postseason. The dreck is over, and now we start looking ahead, not just to the Washington game, because for whatever reason that game was put on Sunday Night Football. I have no idea why. Every Dolphins and Bills fan is freaking out on social media. Why are we on the night game? Everybody hates us, right? So now the Eagles, their season's over, but they can knock Washington out of the playoffs. Hunter Brody's here as usual. How you doing, Broads?
I'm hanging in there. Late night last night. I had to transition from Eagles heartbreak right to Sixers heartbreak. So a lot of emotions last night. It kept me up. I was staring at the wall.
It was a strange night, to say the least. I'm a little disappointed in myself I didn't take the Cavs in the point spread. But I was so footballed up that morning. I was all ready for the football day ahead of me that I was so – and I almost forgot about the Sixers. I got the notification on my phone, Sixers game starting. I'm like, oh, snap.
Oh, you even forgot.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, snap. I'm fumbling around, trying to find the remote, flipping the channel over to the Sixers. Boy, was I disappointed 2 times over, for saying the least.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were. You know, a lot of us in this fan base was a little disappointed to see both teams get destroyed. But we obviously have to start with the Philadelphia Eagles and that debacle. And what I sort of saw was something similar to what I've seen when Carson Wentz was under center. I thought I'll keep it the same way I did when Carson Wentz was the quarterback. I think if the surrounding cast was better, from Doug Pederson to offensive line to the wide receivers and the skill players, you would see better play out of Jalen Hurts. I thought the surrounding cast was what made him look a little bit more like a rookie, and I saw Doug Pederson get away from the run game. Now, is a lot of that because your offensive line had so many false start penalties, which pushed you back behind the sticks? Yeah, I think that there were a lot of factors in play, but you saw a lot of what we've seen with Wentz.
Yes and no. And here's why. I saw what I saw from Hurts in that game was worse than Wentz, because it felt like the second half it kept spiraling out of control. At some point, if you're telling me that Matt Pryor is your best option at right tackle, just forfeit. Don't go out there and play.
What do you mean just forfeit? You can't do that.
Well, find somebody else to play then.
They're on their 5th right tackle. I mean, at some point, you don't have any more options. It's sort of like with Jaquette.
Put 3 tight ends out there, for goodness sake. Like, do something.
I mean, at this point, I feel like that's just going to an extreme of, you just said give up. I mean, at what point can you just give up and forfeit the game? This is what you have because you're so banged up and so depleted. I don't know what you really want them to do. It's like everyone screaming for Schwartz to get fired. You have no option. Think about what you're doing when you're screaming for Jalen Mills to play corner, which is a better option than Jaquette. But my point is, you're screaming for Mills, who stinks at that spot. So at some point, it kind of is what it is, and I think it hurts Doug Pederson when it comes to his play calling. It hurts a lot of people out there. But at the end of the day, you still got to get more out of what you did last night. That's for sure. You can't get blown out. They were outscored 34-3 at one point. And
34-3 after Fletcher Cox left the game.
Right.
So first of all, that tells me that how important he is to the defense. If anybody ever had any questions about that, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to question the injury, but you're telling me in a must-win situation to keep your playoff hopes alive,
well, the
Fletcher
reporting
Cox
on that
is
was
chilling?
weird, wasn't it? It was totally like no specifics, and then they kind of like slid it in later the broadcast that it was a stinger.
Right.
And it was like, wait a minute. Like, is it – a stinger doesn't really answer the question. You know what I mean? Because Jason Kelsey's played through stingers before. He's kind of famous and infamous for that. Some people blame the bad snaps in the Bengals game in 2016 for the fact he played through a stinger, because he said apparently he had trouble gripping the ball, right? I'm sorry, but you're not a center. So it had to be more than a stinger, right? There has to be something else going on. Because remember, I asked Jeff Mosher this weeks ago about Fletcher Cox after the bye week. Rest day. Then all of a sudden, neck day, didn't participate. Again, every single week. Is there a serious injury that Fletcher Cox has that nobody's talking about?
I don't think it's anything more serious than the stinger. I think that's just what kept him out of the football game. You saw Jordan Howard, remember? He had a stinger when he was, not this season, I'm talking back when he actually played legitimate minutes for this team. He had a stinger. That held him out a long period of time. So I think it truly is a stinger, and that kept him out. But I'm just questioning, not that I want to question him and his mentality, because there's a couple of guys, whether it's Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox is in the mix, where if they're out, I do feel that they're out for a reason because they are the ones willing to compete through pain. So that's why some of me thinks, okay, there has to be something serious with this injury. But at the same time, it's must-win situation, season on the line, and you saw what happened when he left the football game. So, I'm a little baffled by the whole Fletcher Cox debacle. But this is now 3 straight games when you look at Jalen Hurts and you say, okay, after halftime, things get ugly and teams figure it out. And when you escape the run, guess what happens? You don't have to stack the box. You know you're going to throw the football. It's easier to defend. And you see that this team has more active linebackers. They have speed. They drop guys back. And they stopped rushing, and they allow Jalen Hurts to try and run because guess what? They could stop him, and they can beat him to certain points because they have speed at that linebacker position. So I saw similar results and a similar offense that was putrid after the 14-3 lead that I've seen all season long.
PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open at 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Don't forget, the Doug Pederson press conference coming up at 2:30. Let's just say Doug is not thrilled today, which he shouldn't be. But I just thought that it was what I heard of Doug so far today. I didn't hear his radio on this morning because, I'm not going to waste my time listening to somebody throw him softball questions when I can listen to real reporters ask him legitimate questions at 2:30 here on the Sports Bash. But let's be realistic. This Eagles team, they should be disappointed. They should be frustrated because they looked incredible the start of that game. And then it felt like a Jenga tower. One block, and it all came tumbling down. And it wasn't even the injuries. You mentioned Jaquette. I felt it took them too long to get him out of the game.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if that was one of those, maybe somebody upstairs was seeing something and said, maybe one of the times he got beat wasn't all his fault, per se. But there was that. Then there was the whole $2 million penalty situation. Then there was in the third and fourth quarter, it felt like the offensive line just couldn't do anything right. And then how does Zach Ertz get caught offsides twice? I mean, what is going on with him? It just felt like the team was crumbling around Hurts. And Hurts is looking around like, guys, what's going on here?
Well, I think this is telling. So we can all agree. Yesterday was Jalen Hurts' worst start since he became the starter. But he was solid in the first 2 starts. This football team is 1-2. So we're all happy and excited about what Jalen Hurts has brought to the table, and there was some excitement and some juice before this game against Dallas. 1-2 with good quarterback play. Doesn't that kind of tell you that there's major issues with this team all around, that it wasn't just solely the quarterback? There are major flaws occurring all around, and you can just look at this wide receiver position. So, look, I'm extremely, extremely disappointed in what I got out of Jalen Reagor, your first-round pick. I defended it because everyone freaked out because it wasn't somebody else without even knowing much about Jalen Reagor, so I thought it wasn't justifiable to have that reaction. Now there's some tape, and he's coming back from the injury with the thumb. You see enough. I'm extremely disappointed out of him. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he's inactive. He's unplayable, really. So now here we are with the top 10 pick, and we got to question once again, do you have to go out and get a wide receiver because you can't rely on Deshaun Jackson? He plays one play. He gets the big bomb, and that's it. Then he's gone again. You're going to have to pay $6 million to not keep him. I mean, it's a problem when you look at this wide receiver and skill players. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to try and get another big-time playmaker at that position to make it 3 straight seasons of trying to attack that position?
I'm out on the wide receiver pick.
But you have nothing. You have nothing at that position. So what are you going to do next year?
But do you really have nothing?
You have nothing. You have nothing.
Because there's times you've thrown at the guys like Reagor and Watkins and Goddard and these other guys, and they made plays. Greg Ward had 2 touchdowns last week. What happened to him this week?
But that is Greg Ward. Greg Ward is your reliable slot little piece, okay? You can live with Greg Ward, but what about elsewhere? If you don't have Alshon, Deshaun, Jalen Reagor, who's been disappointing, and I'm not out on him fully yet. He obviously can play a bit in this league. He's going to have to adjust, but the route running seems to be abysmal. The body language I don't love at times. It's like he gives up on certain routes. What else do you have? Like, I get it. Quez Watkins can show you speed, this and that, but still so raw. And it's not like you look at him and say, that's a wide receiver. You might have to attack that once again. And then you look at the secondary. This team, if you look at everything they need, good luck. Good luck, because you look at the cap space problem too. I don't know how they're going to do it. We might see another season similar to this season next year.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. The PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open at 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Don't forget, coming up at 3 o'clock, Grayson's Grades with Scott Grayson. 4 o'clock, Andrew Dicecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. 5:20, KC Joyner, one thought on every game, and he recaps everything he saw on tape from the Eagles versus Cowboys coming up here on 97.3 ESPN. Also, anytime hotline calls, and we got to talk about the Sixers weekend, too, at some point today. We'll get to that. I promise we will get to that, because I cannot go 4 hours with you and me not touching on the roller coaster that was the Sixers weekend, because I was feeling great on Saturday. I hit on every pick I made on the air from Saturday's show. I went 4 for 4 on my picks. The Sixers cover, which was one of my picks. I'm like, they're going to go to Cleveland and win the game. Maybe they won't win by like 15, 20 points, but they'll win the game. I don't know who was worse yesterday. I don't know if it was the Clippers' loss, the Sixers' loss, or the Eagles' loss. And how telling is it that two of those three teams I just mentioned are both in Philadelphia? It was a rough weekend.
It definitely was a rough weekend, and we'll attack the Sixers' loss and what they did with Embiid and what happened with Ben Simmons for sure. But getting back to this football game, I just look at it and I want to know, with you, when you view Doug Pederson this year, and it does seem like he had a conversation with the front office about his tenure here, and it does seem like he's safe to go for this upcoming season for 2021. How do you assess him? How much time do you think he has left on the clock? How do you view his leash as a head coach? Because I've been very vocal about how horrendous I thought he was this season. I thought he was an F- if we talk about Grayson's grades all season long. But it's not time for him to leave yet. I do think that he deserves an opportunity to bounce back from this awful season, because I have seen a way better version of Doug Pederson, and I think it's in there. And for as much as we rip apart not having skill players, not having an offensive line that's healthy, having quarterback play that has been really bad, that goes on the coach as well. Like, that impacts how he can call games too. So if we're going to rip the roster and rip who they have, how do you expect the coach to just be able to magically have it work to a T? So I think he deserves an opportunity to move forward and to fix things.
I do not believe firing Doug Pederson fixes anything. Period. Because if you fire Doug Pederson, number one, who are you replacing him with? Are you guaranteeing me that whoever comes in here is going to get you back to the playoffs for 3 straight years, get you close to the Super Bowl? I can't guarantee that. That's my first problem with the whole get rid of Doug Pederson thing. I have seen multiple times where coaches have a bad year or two and they bounce back. John Harbaugh was almost out of Baltimore a few years ago. Now he's back.
Sean Payton, same thing. Almost
Sean Payton,
out of New Orleans.
7-9. All of a sudden, he's a contender again. We've seen coaches who have won rings get the bounce back. I want to give Pederson the chance to bounce back. If we have another year next year like this year, I am 100% on board with saying, Doug, we appreciate everything you've done, but 2 straight years is no longer a coincidence. Remember the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Maybe this is just a bad year. Maybe this is a down year. Maybe this is just too much behind the scenes. And by the way, I've said this once, twice, a million times. We don't know all the facts. Because there's nobody in the locker room, there's no reporters in the building, there's no inside reporting information going on with the Eagles because nobody's allowed in the building. So we don't really know what's going on. There may be some bigger stuff going on behind the scenes that we have no idea about, that may be bigger than Doug. You know, this whole John Dorsey thing, right? And I'm bringing this up purposely. How do we know that John Dorsey didn't come in here and start just shaking the cages?
In a bad way?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was hired a couple months ago. So, I mean, this roster construction isn't just a one season. This has been
What I'm saying
a major
is that
problem.
He came in here after the draft. So what if he came in here and started trying to act like he's the GM here?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit of the way I see that personally is I think that's a little bit of a reason. I don't think these issues start with John Dorsey because these issues have been snowballing for a while.
I'm not saying it is John Dorsey. What I'm saying is that is there something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about?
I think there's stuff going on behind the scenes between Laurie and Howie Roseman. Sure, I just don't know if and I think if anything, the Dorsey thing would be because they're trying to escape what has been the issue for a couple of years. Maybe that's move Howie Roseman off of the player talent evaluation side of things. And does that piss off Howie Roseman? Maybe. And if that starts a feud, well, that's a Howie Roseman problem, not a Laurie problem, because at the end of the day, if that's the better option for this franchise, you can't worry about if it internally destroys Howie Roseman because he needs to be able to man up and figure out what's the next step to make sure that he's still doing his job in this organization. So I see your point in terms of John Dorsey coming in here. Did that start maybe a little bit of an internal feud? Maybe, but if it's for the betterment of the franchise, that's something you still have to make, right? That's a move you still have to do.
If it betters the franchise, but we don't know yet.
Correct. We don't know. And there's a lot of people covering the team saying no matter what you do with John Dorsey, bring him in, whatever his title is, it's still Howie Roseman's show. So at that point, what is the John Dorsey bringing him in? What does that do?
Right, we have no idea. And the other side of this is you have 200 offensive coaches, and nobody knows what any of them really does. How much of that factored in this season as well?
I think that needs to change next year.
I think you got to streamline that. I think the bigger problem with this team is not specifically Doug, although Doug bears a chunk of the responsibility. To me, it comes down to the Eagles need to figure out how to make everything better, how to clean up the mess. Because I think we walked into this season with an expectation that was sky high, and they got nowhere close to it. And I think they didn't get anywhere close to it because of the reality that, let's be realistic, nobody knows who's in charge anymore. And when you have nobody knowing who's really in charge of what, there's opportunity for confusion and problems. And when there's opportunity for confusion and problems, that trickles into the locker room. And I think the players at times reflected the chaos in their own organization.
And I think, sadly, that when they do have to reshape this thing, it's not a one-year process. And I know in football, though, you can rather quickly kind of find your rhythm. And look at Miami. They were a dumpster fire. Now this year, exciting, fun, 10 wins, right? So it's a totally different viewpoint of how they switch so quickly. So it is very possible. But I look at their current roster, what they're lacking, the cornerback, safety, linebackers. You're going to need defensive linemen. You need offensive linemen. You need wide receivers. I mean, there is a lot that you need to bring in with a ton of cap space, quarterback problem, what you're doing with the front office, what you're doing with the coaches. I don't think this is a one-year fix. You might see, maybe not to the level of trash that you saw this year, but it might be another season of a little bit of a version of hell just for you to maybe explode forward
Make that
after.
Transition.
Yeah, it might be that way.
It's a possibility. 609-403-0970, playsugarhouse.com, text board 609-403-0970. We'll get to your text in just a moment.
I want to bring something up to you, though, about Doug.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 years ago, 4-6, made a push. Last year, 5-7, made a push. Won the division both times, I think the first year they were in a wild card spot right underneath the Dallas Cowboys. But regardless, both times they made the playoffs. 4-6, 5-7. And I did question, and I brought this up to Gil, I remember on the air, this isn't sustainable. It's not something that you can do every year. And then this year, they're 4-9-1, and they're trying to rally, win the last 4 games. This is a common theme for 3 years. Is this Doug Pederson? Like next year, if we do this again and they're 5-7 and they rally on back, win a couple games, keep you involved until the very end, and then either they get in or they don't get in. How long can you put up with this version of Doug Pederson? And a lot plays a role. It's not as simple as one guy. That's the reason why. Injuries, players not playing up to their capabilities. A lot plays a role. But this is a common theme now for 3 years. It's not sustainable. So that is something that I am really heavily going to look at next season. But how do you view that personally?
Well, part of the reason why they've had some of those struggles was because of injuries. I think that the injury issue is becoming ridiculous. At some point, and I know people have texted in and tweeted in and talked about this before, so I'm not the first person to say this. Maybe we got to figure out who's the person who keeps saying, hey, Howie, let's sign this injury-plagued guy. Or let's keep drafting this injury-plagued guy. Like, maybe at some point, the Eagles just need to say, it's not about talent, it's about health. Because at some point, when you're on your 13th different offensive line combination, when Deshaun Jackson can't stay on the field, when all these different guys, Sidney Jones, fill-in-the-blank player, everyone keeps getting injured, at some point, it's just not that anymore. Because has there been a season since Doug Pederson has been here and Howie Roseman took over where there hasn't been a plethora of injuries? There hasn't. And I want to hear about the medical staff.
They switched those.
Right. I want to hear about the medical staff. This isn't a talent evaluation problem. At some point, you got to stop drafting and signing dudes with injury issues. Right? Because why are you the only team that 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 5 seasons in a row, you're plagued by injuries? You overcame it in 2017 and win a Super Bowl. You overcame it in 2018 and almost beat the Saints and got back to the conference championship game. But 2019, you ran out of the pixie dust. You ran out of the magic formula. And 2020, obviously, the magic is dead, okay? The magician lost his touch. Doug Pederson, Howie Roseman, you lost your touch. So maybe you got to go back to the drawing board. Like, I know you're not a movie guy, but there's a movie called The Prestige, okay? It's an incredible movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's with Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. And they are rival magicians, all right? And the whole movie is about these two guys it's about one-upping each other. The problem is the one guy realized he was falling so far behind. And he's like, I got to go back to the drawing board. I can't beat this guy. Well, he comes up with a trick that is so extreme, he almost, it's self-destructive. He ends up killing himself at the end. But he went back to the drawing board because he realized that he lost the touch. And the other guy realized that the other guy went too far and he didn't want to be like him. And it ended up happily ever after. But the point is that maybe Doug and Howie just need to realize that what they're doing isn't working. And they just got to say, just because the owner likes Jason Peters and Howie likes Deshaun Jackson and Doug likes, I don't even know who Doug likes anymore. I feel like Doug just likes everybody. But at some point, they got to go back and say, we got to stop signing these guys.
I would have to agree with you. You look at all of these players, and they're consistently banged up. The Deshaun Jackson signing is a nightmare. You go back to that, and you look at since he's been here, he has not been available for this football team. And it is interesting to look at it from a Doug Pederson standpoint when it comes to how much say he has. Who does he want? Player evaluation. Does he have a big impact on what type of players that they're drafting?
Josh Hennig along with Hunter Brody here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to your text in just a bit at 609-403-0973. But joining us right now, the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, as he does each and every day after Eagles game day, Grayson's Grades. You can check them all out at 97.3ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Of course, Scott Grayson's been covering the Eagles for several years now for us, doing the grades, doing a great job. And this week, well, let's just say there were no A's to be handed out, Broads. 0. But there were a couple B's. But there were some failing grades, too. We'll get to those with Scott Grayson now as he joins us. All guests do on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. And Scott Grayson's Grades brought to you by Cross County Connection, the region's transportation management association. They are dedicated to improving the quality of life in South Jersey through transportation solutions. Check out more about Cross County Connection online at www.driveless.com. Scott, how you doing after suffering through that game yesterday?
Well, I'll tell you, that was interesting. I know I was, I think, stunned in that second half with what I was seeing. And, then I took a look at where the Eagles would be in the draft and thought, well, if they're going to fix this thing, perhaps this is better for them. And I would have rather, all along I was in the camp where I just wanted to see Jalen Hurts get a little playoff experience and see what he can do. And that's not meant to be. So this team's got to fix itself. And if there's any chance of doing that, they're going to have some decent draft picks as you go through the first round and then go through beyond that. And they've got a lot to do with this team. So I think I'm kind of taking the approach of like, okay, let's see how they try to fix this thing. And there are a lot of questions facing owner Jeffrey Lurie with what to do with his front office, what to do with his coaches, what to do with his quarterbacks. And I think it's going to be a fascinating offseason around here that will not be short of any talk at all as to what they should do with some of these players and with this roster.
Now, just to follow up on what you just said, Scott, so you mentioned about the draft pick. I said in the last hour that I'm out on drafting another receiver. I don't know if this team is in a position to develop a receiver. So what would you do with that draft pick? Do you draft someone there? Do you consider trading out of that spot to get more assets? If you were in the room with Howie Roseman, what would you recommend him doing?
I'm certainly open to trading down depending on what you can get for it. I agree with you that I do not want Howie Roseman drafting another receiver in that spot. I'm kind of the opinion that you got enough issues here that perhaps the best available is what they should do. I also feel like, look, their secondary is a mess. You will not have Rodney McLeod back to start next season. Jalen Mills is what he is. Darius Slay is good, certainly. But you need another corner in that secondary and perhaps even another safety. I don't feel like they gave Kayvon Wallace much of a chance to show what he could do. And I'm a little curious in terms of saying I don't know what you have there in terms of young players in the secondary. I think there's a lot of needs for sure. And this team's got to figure out what those are by draft day, which can be helped a little bit by some trades that they may make in the offseason. Will Zach Ertz be back? Will Carson Wentz be back? Will Jalen Hurts be back if they choose to keep Carson? I mean, there's so many things to figure out that by the time the draft rolls around, you may have fixed some of the holes on your roster. But the number one thing, in my opinion, this team needs to get younger. These injuries are a function, in my opinion, as well of older guys that are getting beat up more and taking the punishment and not able to bounce back like they used to. And I love Elaine Johnson, but Lane's getting beat up. There's certainly a lot of things this team needs to fix. And no, I don't know that if you got a number 5, 6, 7 pick, you want to take a wide receiver there. I also don't know that I want Howie being a part of that process at this point anymore either. I'm fine with Howie managing the salary cap and some of these contracts and perhaps trades, but I don't know that I want Howie evaluating talent anymore.
Well, it's funny you say that, Scott, because not one but 2 mock drafts I've seen today with the Eagles at 6 have them both taking Patrick Surtain, the top elite corner from Alabama. Would that interest you, Broads?
Absolutely. Oh, no doubt about it. Look, when you dive through this roster and where they're at, you can find holes at every single position that they're going to need to fix for the most part. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason to see how they do it. But looking back into yesterday's game, you gave Jalen Hurts a D. Now, we can all agree that this was the worst we've seen him in his very short career. How did you assess his play, Scott?
It was tough to assess him because I felt like, I felt like he experienced what Carson Wentz went through from the play calling perspective. You've got a running game running in the first quarter, and then, as is Doug's MO, he goes away from it. And as a quarterback, if the opponent knows you're going to pass, it is a lot easier on them. When they have to defend a run or perhaps wait to make sure the ball isn't handed off, that RPO stuff has worked well with Hurts and Miles Sanders, and they got away from all that entirely. And not only that, I do want to credit the Cowboys, and I hate saying those words, with the sense that they made adjustments, and I felt like they did more to try to limit Jalen Hurts from taking off up the middle through a gap in the pocket. Those linebackers pounced on that, and those DNs, they slid down the line a lot quicker to help keep from that having that happen in the second half. So they really did a good job of taking the run away from Hurts. The Eagles went away from the run themselves with Sanders, and they just became predictable. By the time Jalen Hurts turned it over, the Cowboys were dropping everybody back in coverage into the end zone, and he really had nowhere to throw the ball. So, was the D the right grade for him? I kind of felt like it was a D grade for him, but some of the blame, I think, has to go on the play calling that he had to run with. And The fact that no adjustments were made from the coaching staff on the Eagles side to help counter that. And I think he was hung out to dry.
I couldn't agree more. When I was watching yesterday, the first thing I thought of was, okay, now Jalen Hurts is going through the same thing that happened with Wentz when it comes to all the surrounding pieces were so abysmal that it impacted his play. Now, how much of this, because I thought Doug was the biggest issue of them all yesterday, but how much of that goes into all of the pre-snap penalties that forced this team to be in longer situations, which then forced him to get away from the run. He already does that to begin with. This is just almost an icing on top of, hey, you're really going to get away from the run.
Yeah, but I still think that I totally agree with you. First of all, the pre-snap penalties is a lack of discipline, and I know you want to give me all the injuries that have happened, and I'm talking about Doug here. You want to run through some of what's going on and all the different inconsistencies you have out there. I hear you. However, that's a lack of discipline. That's a lack of working on things like that during the week. I know that the Eagles piped in some crowd noise because they knew that Dallas was going to have more fans than they've really faced or had to deal with in terms of crowd noise. But still, Matt Pryor, 3 false start penalties. The amount of the penalties that were – look, I get a holding call happening when you're trying to compete, make a play, see if you can get away with something. All right, that's in the level of competition. Pre-snap penalties are just awful. And any coach at any level will tell you that they will kill you. And they killed the Eagles yesterday. And, to me it was an excuse to get out of the run because of some of those pre-snap penalties. You could still run plays. You could still do what it is in a sense a run by running a screen pass. You could do jet sweeps. You have speed on with those receivers, and there was not even any of that. I just think, I in my own mind, I'm going back and forth about whether or not Doug should be here, and I don't think he helped himself with his lack of adjustments from the play calling perspective yesterday, and it's, at the same time exposing some of his in-game management problems. When he's got a good team, I love aggressive Doug. When he does not have a good team that's rolling, look, it's okay to kick the field goal or to punt the ball and pin the other team deep. And I just felt like that second half, some of Doug's game management decisions got away from that too. The pre-snap penalties, certainly I think you can blame some of the coaches, but that's on the players too. It's just a mess all around. Yesterday was just, I think they got exposed in a big way. And I think what we're going to find out is how embarrassed was Jeffrey Lurie as he decides what to do with his staff.
Scott Grayson joining us here for Grayson's Grades here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow Scott on Twitter at SGraysonFox29. Of course, all of his grades after each Eagles game is at 97.3ESPN.com. Scott just jumped down that road with Doug Pederson a little more. From my recollection, and I don't have a specific head count on it, but I feel like I've seen more D's and F's from Pederson from you and your grades this year than any other time than Doug Pederson has been this year. So in your eyes of covering the team, what has changed or not changed with Doug Pederson? What has changed with him from 2016 and 17 to now in your eyes that this guy seemingly each and every week just can't do anything right?
I think you're right about that. I think I have given him more D's and F's this year, and I think a large part of that is because there's just there has not been creativity in the play calling at all. This was the most boring, bland playbook I think we've seen out of Doug Pederson in all his years here. There was no creativity, no adjustments made at halftime. You look over the last few weeks, the difference in how many points they scored in the first half versus how many they scored in the second half. Teams were making adjustments at halftime. They were making none and continuing to run the same stuff that was predictable. And it led to turnovers. It led to sacks upon sacks upon sacks. I mean, some of that you can put on the quarterbacks, Hurts and Wentz. Sure. But for the most part, there was no effort made to help them out. I think Carson Wentz, sure, I think he deserved to be benched. I think he did make some mistakes. I think he did fail to read things that were happening downfield. But I also feel like the coaching staff hung him out to dry, too, in the sense that everybody could tell. Wentz was better when he rolled out of the pocket, and there wasn't much of an effort made to get him out of the pocket where he was more comfortable to be successful. That's a function of a coach not knowing his players and his team and really not being in step with them. And in the past, Pederson has been, and I feel like he's had his players' backs, and he has called plays that benefited the personnel he had on the field. This year, I didn't see any of that. I just saw a guy who looked lost. Now, maybe he can find it again. Maybe he can resurrect Wentz. Maybe he can get off to a better start with a new quarterback in Hurts. But if you're Jeffrey Lurie, which Doug are you evaluating? The one you saw in the past or the one you saw this year? And I'm quite frankly glad I don't have to make that choice.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The way I look at it, though, is, I've been very hard on him. He's been extremely frustrating. But you mentioned it, before he did do some things that made sense with the team, and he made sure that his game plan catered to his players. So he has done it before. I do think he deserves one more shot at it, but I do look at the past. 4-6, battled back. 5-7, battled back. This season, 4-9-1, attempted to battle back, but it fell short. It's not sustainable. Is this Doug Pederson? I think that's a fair question, no?
No, I think that's a fair question, too. Sure, you want a team that can finish out a season and be playing well in December, but you cannot dig a hole in September and October, and that's what this team has done routinely, as you pointed out. The only time they didn't was 2017, and that ended up, of course, leading to a Super Bowl. But, there's certain questions and issues there that I think you need to explore and say, well, your team comes out of training camp usually pretty healthy, so you've had your healthy team to start the season, and you're not winning games. Don't forget, they blew a 17-0 lead to Washington in week 1 that had they held on and won that game, they're still alive this week. So there's a lot of things you could look at and point to even this season that show you that there were places this team could have been able to compete. You're in the worst division in football. You're going to play likely the last place schedule of the worst division in football coming into next year. Now, that could be a very good thing if this team can fix things. And they had a last place schedule in 2017 when they went on that great run. So, does Doug deserve another chance? I think, honestly, he probably will, but this is going to be it. If they don't make the playoffs next year, Lurie's going to can him right away. That's been his MO. If a team doesn't make the playoffs 2 years in a row, he moves on. Now, the other questions are within that staff. I mean, look, in my opinion, I don't understand how you have an aggressive coach like Doug Pederson and the most conservative defensive coordinator on the planet. The guy never blitzes. He never tries to make it. Michael Jacquet, everybody in the building could see yesterday, had no business being on that field. I said a full quarter before he made the change, why don't they move Jalen Mills down there and put Kayvon Wallace at safety? But they were so I don't know. Did they not think that the Cowboys had found something that, they're just lucky they're picking on him over there, and they're just lucky they're going there play after play? No, they exposed him, and they kept using it to their advantage, and no changes were made. So even if Doug's back, I got to believe Jim Schwartz is gone, and in that regard, maybe you're going to bring about a little bit of change, but I don't know. I think there's just a lot of issues here that can they be resolved? Yes, the NFL, the way it's structured now, affords you the luxury to fix problems within 1 year of one off season. Now they've got some salary cap issues. They got older players. They certainly have things to work through, but it's not impossible. And the question is whether or not they're going to be able to do enough of that. Because, look, I don't think the NFC East is all of a sudden going to be a great division next year either. So there's a chance if you can get right, get some things going, that next year you get back to winning this division and perhaps get a little bit back on track. But you've got to make some things happen. And they've definitely got to do some self-evaluation all the way around the board. From Howie, I think he needs to be held accountable if you lay out his drafts over the last few years, to Doug, to Jim Schwartz, to Press Taylor. I mean, there's got to be some changes around here for sure.
Scott, one more before we let you go, and I always appreciate you jumping on. You mentioned about Jim Schwartz, and if I could just play a little devil's advocate with you on that. The Eagles this year have been top 5 in the NFL in sacks, top 5 in the NFL in pass, quarterback hits and quarterbacks pressured is the 3 stats. So if Schwartz is gone and you say maybe they should move on, then how do they replace him with someone who's going to get you better production than what they've gotten this year, considering how flawed the defensive roster is?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and you certainly threw out some good numbers, but I will throw back at you. How many deep balls have these defensive backs given up? How many back-breaking plays have been given up in the secondary that, sure, you may be able to get them in a third down because you've got a sack here, you've got a negative play there, but they're beating you over the top ultimately at the end. And how many times have we seen these corners? It's clearly a coaching problem. I don't know who's coaching it, but it's been consistent. They don't turn around and defend the ball. They don't turn around and play the ball. They don't turn around and try to pick it off. They just keep their head facing, and they try to face guard a receiver and bat the ball away from their hands at the moment they try to make the catch. That is not the way to play defensive back. That is not a way to make things happen for your team or spark your team. And to me, that is the biggest problem with this defense. And then when they're not getting pressure in some of those games, he doesn't try to dial up a blitz here and there. He does maybe here, but not there. It's once a game, if that. Look, there were a lot of times that I liked things that this defense did, but that was when you had a piece like a Malcolm Jenkins who really was a jack of all trades and made your defense better. They don't have that guy right now. I don't see that guy on this roster. I don't see that guy coming to this roster in the offseason. And I think this defense needs to move on from that. And that's just my opinion. I think Schwartz has certainly done some things to get some pressure. They've got a good D-line. But when they're healthy, they're a good D-line. No Fletcher Cox yesterday. Look how big that was when he came out of the game. But there's also no adjustments. And that's my problem, too, is that when things seem to not be going well, like I said before, he doesn't make changes. He doesn't adjust to the game of what's going on. You see it on the other side of the ball against the Eagles offense. Those adjustments create different results. And I think that they kind of play a little bit of defense by the rule of insanity, that they don't make any changes but expect different results. So I think there's got to be some issues and accountability held there. They've given up way too many points this year. And I will say this, too. In the past, Jim Schwartz, to his credit, his defense would bend but not break. They'd give up field goals, not touchdowns. This year, it has been drastically opposite. A lot of touchdowns, very few times they held the opponent to field goals, and it's killed them.
He's Scott Grayson. Got the full list of grades. Only 2 Bs, no As, and Pederson and Schwartz got Fs. Find out why over at 973ESPN.com. And, of course, follow Scott on Twitter at SGraysonFox29 and catch him on Fox 29 each Sunday as well. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk on the hotline. Scott, always appreciate the time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
And, of course, Grayson's Grades being brought to you by Cross County Connection, the region's transportation management association. They are dedicated to improving the quality of life in South Jersey through transportation solutions. Learn more about Cross County Connection online at www.driveless.com. We'll talk to the potential winner of our Fantasy Football League coming up at 4 o'clock with Andrew Dicecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Also, anytime hotline calls coming up and your texts at 609-403-0973 here on the Sports Bash. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill, along with Hunter Brody on 97.3 ESPN FM and the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Yes, it's free. Whether you have an Android, an Apple phone, whatever your app device is, it's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Young along with Hunter Brody here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Getting your reactions to Eagles' loss to the Cowboys. Their playoff hopes are done. Projected to have the 6th overall pick as of right now in the NFL draft. So we'll get more into that. Of course, Andrew Dicecco, who covers the draft, we'll ask him about that as well coming up at Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. But first, your text at 609-403-0973 and your anytime hotline calls as well. 3 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash being brought to you by Recovery Centers of America, Drug and Alcohol Addiction Treatment Centers located in Mays Landing, New Jersey, and Devon, PA. Let's hear from the people. 609-403-0973. One texter says, the coach is either holding back answers for some reason or he's clueless. His answer about how to fix what's wrong is too vanilla to be true. From Pederson, says the texter.
It's so hard for me personally to really take that much out of Doug because I don't know if, like the texter said, does he not know? Or I feel with Doug, it doesn't matter if he knows or doesn't know. He's so bad in front of the microphone that it's hard to really take anything from what he states.
Yeah, he's not eloquent, to say the least. He's not a great articulator. He's not a great orator. He's not a great verbalizer of what's going on in his head. So it's hard to know what Doug really thinks and feels day to day.
Like his last question, he was asked, I believe it was Rob Motti to end the press conference today about, how do you kind of make the next step here? And he talked about how he wants to be a part of the assessment with the evaluation. And he talked about wanting to be, I kind of wrote it down here just so I can get it properly. It stood that out to me. He wants to be a part of the solution, a part of the evaluation process, a voice that is heard, communication with Howie and his staff about personnel. Is that saying now? Because we thought it was a collaborative effort. Is this Doug saying that he doesn't have much say with that? Or is he that bad at answering that it came out worse than what it really is?
It might be a little bit of both. Because remember, with this COVID-19, nobody's allowed in the building for half the year, right? the whole draft was done virtually. Like, maybe there were things that slipped through the cracks. Maybe there were conversations that would have been had that weren't had, and then Doug Pederson was maybe not fully involved as he usually is, maybe than in the past. I don't know all the details. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
It definitely is a possibility. I think you bring up a great point. You are working with this whole new system of, hey, you got to do Zoom calls. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to be out of the NovaCare complex because if you remember, there were times where they had some coaches and staff members that did test positive.
Nobody's allowed in the building Monday and Tuesday anymore for this whole month.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, I'm sure that definitely played a role in how these people communicated. But if this is a collaborative effort like we're informed, you would think that the top three guys would find ways to be on the same page regardless of having to do it virtually or not.
It all sounds good in theory until actually someone tries to do it, and then something always falls apart, it seems like. Because that's the serious story of the Eagles season, right?
There's no doubt about it. Didn't it feel right, though? Like, as much as I wanted to squeak in, I'm not one of those, I'd rather lose, get a draft pick. No. If you told me Hurts, because everything else worked, the Ravens beat the Giants, right? Everything seemed to fall into place. Washington lost. If you won that game, we would have all felt great about your chances on winning the division. So, it was definitely possible. But didn't this feel right? This was the right outcome at the end of the day. This was the football god saying, the Eagles don't deserve this. We're not doing this. No.
It's funny you say it because a texter at 609-403-0973 says, yes, this year was bad, but after 3 straight playoffs appearances, I'll live. They were only going to get bounced in round 1 anyway. The anger will fade and the excitement over a top pick will build. It's Philadelphia. We've been through worse.
I don't like the what's the point of making the playoffs if you're going to lose first round anyway. There's a lot in play. There's a lot. You're talking about a quarterback who would be Jalen Hurts. We don't know if he's the franchise quarterback or not. We don't know what's happening with that mess. But he gets to play a home playoff game with or without fans. I don't care. He gets to play a playoff game? You don't think that that's valuable? Some of these other guys, Jalen Reagor, Greg Ward, Quez Watkins, Miles Sanders, like these players, playing a playoff game matters. So to think, who cares? They're just going to lose anyway, that's a bad mentality in my opinion. I don't like it. I just don't. You don't know what can happen. This team beat the Saints, right? I mean, who knows? This team is flawed, no doubt about it. But I'd rather see it than not see it.
We'll get to more of your text a little bit later in the show, 609-403-0973. But Bro, tonight, we want to hear the anytime hotline calls. What's that number again people can call?
856-442-9805. And it's available at any time, 24/7. You can call in with whatever.
All right, let's get a couple of these calls in.
This is Steve from California. What a disaster. The energy level again. I keep on bringing up the energy level and the intensity. There was nothing there. The first quarter maybe. But then we have people like Zach Ertz, no energy. I mean, Ertz is shell of what he used to be. I guess he knows he's going to probably be traded or released. And then the penalties. This is discipline problems all and up and down that damn roster, man. But to see all those penalties and crucial drives, they actually had a chance in the third and fourth quarter. But with all these penalties and they're out of whack, nobody knows where to line up. It's a joke.
He says the Eagles are a joke.
He's not wrong.
No, he's not. And I'm glad he brought the penalties because the penalties are more frustrating for me than anything else yesterday. The fact that Pryor had multiple false starts. The fact that
Isaac Seumalo got caught a couple times too.
Isaac Seumalo had a dumb hold at one point. I mean, I don't even know what the heck he was holding for. And it just felt like the team became so unfocused once they realized they were losing. And you got to blame the players, but you also got to blame the coaches. Jeff Stoutland is supposed to be this great offensive line coach, right? This great savant. Where's he? Where's the blame on him for his offensive line?
Let me throw this back at you.
Not going out there and getting the job done.
Let me throw this back at you. We sit here and we say, look, when you look at the defense and when you see Jim Schwartz, sometimes you are so handcuffed that you can't really do much more. You have these guys, and yes, switching Mills and doing this a quarter earlier could have been a better option. Still a bad option. Still not a great option at all. Better option, sure. With the offensive line, I don't know how many offensive line coaches can go to your 6th, 5th right tackle and say, don't make any mistakes. And that's kind of where I'm at with Stoutland, because I think he does a great job with a lot of these guys. Driscoll, right? Matt Pryor, at some point with him, I don't know. I don't know how much more Jeff Stoutland can do is my point. Just because when you're on that level of offensive line, it's sort of like with Jim Schwartz. What can you do?
I just think you could just go to Pryor and be like, just don't move. just stare at the football. Don't move until the ball is snapped.
I promise you he probably tried something of that nature to make sure it doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, he can only do so much. And this also takes a bit off of Doug Pederson because everyone says discipline, discipline, discipline. That's what penalties are. That's a reflection of the head coach, which I think is fine. But once again, when you dive back to who you're playing at right tackle, is this kind of obvious that this would be the result based off of you being so far back on the depth chart?
Anytime hotline.
This is Eddie from California. What can we say, man? The team is atrocious. But I know a lot of the phone calls you're going to get on this are going to be regarding the defense. My thing is, why are you only going to blame the defense? The offense only put up 17 points. What it's probably been nearly their average the entire season. It just proves once again that it wasn't who was behind center that was the main issue. It's your coaching. Been saying that since the beginning of the season, and that's what I'm sticking with. It wasn't Wentz, all of it Wentz. It was Doug Pederson, the play calling, and that's where we're at. And that's where we're going to be for 2020. For one more week.
I thought he brought up a great point, though, because a lot of people look at the 37 points, and the one touchdown was so late, the game was already over at that point anyway. But, Jim Schwartz lost this game because the defense was getting shelled. And I look at it this way. When you look at the offense versus the defense, whose fault was it? Well, knowing, just like I talked about with the offensive line, knowing you were at this part of your depth chart, getting destroyed by these wide receivers, it made sense. This was supposed to happen because you don't have a lot of talent. Offensively, while you are lacking talent, and I went through the wide receivers and how bad they were, on this historically pathetic defense, to start out with 14 points and then only score 3 the rest of the way, that's where my issues lie more than the defense, because the defense getting abused made sense. It should have happened.
Right, you're without Fletcher Cox. You're without arguably your best defensive player overall. So I get that you're going to get scored on. But at some point, the offense has got to do something. And I do have to blame Doug and whoever else is in. I mean, who knows who's calling the plays anymore? This whole chicanery about who's calling the plays and who's not, it's all a bunch of malarkey,
I
right?
think Doug is ever since they made the change. I think they tried something new when Wentz was under center, but once they made that switch, it seemed Doug was the guy.
Right, but whatever the reasoning is for why you were out there making bad calls, whatever the reason is, I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear about how, the team, the problems. No, at some point, you just got to do better. I don't care what it is. You want to run the ball 40 times, run the ball 40 times. You want to throw 50 screen passes or 50, whatever is working, just stick with it. And it felt like Doug spent the final 3 quarters, him and his staff, whoever's talking in his ear telling him this is a good idea, that person should be fired. But whoever it is, somebody's got to go up and be like, this isn't working. We should try something else. And it felt like nobody was doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Scott Grayson said it best when we were talking with him about his grades. When you look at it and you saw the game plan work early, right? You had the 9 runs, the 2 passes, although some of those were actually called passes, but Jalen Hurts utilized his legs to get the first down. It worked. And then you saw, because he got away from the run, teams just backed off. We don't need to stack the box. This guy doesn't run the football at all. And how about the broadcast stating that this is what Doug Pederson does? He loves to run the ball. What? Do you watch the Eagles ever? This guy's been here for 5 years. You think this guy loves to run the football? That shows me that they did not do their homework at all, because that's not the case whatsoever. But getting back to my point, when you're a defense and you know that Doug Peterson's going to draw back 1 billion times, you don't have to stack the box. You allow your guys to sag off. Good luck. And if you think you're going to beat us with your legs, Jalen Hurts, we have more of these versatile linebackers that can catch you. And how about this? I want to get your thoughts on this, Josh. Jalen Hurts, after the game, we were informed he was nicked up, right? This is 3 football games, and his style is to run, to take on hits. That first touchdown that got called back, he was willing to take the hit to get into the end zone. So I bring up, is this a sustainable style of play for a guy after 3 games who's getting nicked up? And look, everyone's going to take shots. It's football. You're going to be banged up. You play through it. But, something to just be aware of. It's 3 games, and he's already getting something that is hurting him.
Well, I think you can't play football without getting nicked up at some point.
That's true.
It's a physical game. Like, you played hockey. Like, very rarely you're going to play a hockey game and not get some sort of ding.
Yeah, 5 games into the season of the 80-game season, you're already working through some stuff.
Right. So, to me, I'm not going to sit here and be frustrated that he got dinged up. I am going to be frustrated with the fact that, maybe there was a lack of pride by his teammates to protect him a little bit,
Well, isn't that what we were talking about with the first 2 games of the spark? At what point will the spark fizzle out?
Right.
And did it last 2 games? And that's not to say I'm not intrigued or encouraged with what Jalen Hurts did in the first 2 games, because it's obvious that he did things that Carson Wentz wasn't doing. He showed a lot of positive signs. He did great things out there on the football field in the first 2 games. This game struggled a bit, and I just wonder, okay, now there's more film. Will guys study the film and realize, hey, drop guys back, it's going to be a lot harder for him? I mean, once someone puts out a blueprint, it seems to be a lot tougher. And Doug isn't great at adjusting. So if you want to play that card too, that adds another element.
Anytime hotline calls.
This is Darius, man. What a terrible, terrible way to go out. I feel bad for anybody that legitimately did the Philly sports experience and watched that Eagles game and then watched the first half of this Sixers game late. Or I had to check in at halftime because I couldn't do it, bro. Yeah, I mean, I guess we get a better draft pick now because we have the playoffs. And people aren't thinking about the fact that maybe with this draft pick, y'all looking forward to getting another QB, bro. That's what we're getting, QB factory. Jalen, if it's not bad enough, man, but I'm out of here, man. I can't even talk right now. I'm out of here. It's being real. Hopefully these Sixers can turn around.
Where's he going?
I don't know where he was going. I think that encapsulates some of the frustration, right? Is that you're like, man, what a rough weekend. The Sixers had a horrible loss to the Cavs. This team lost to the Cowboys. Yeah, we got a top pick, but what are we even going to do with it? Like, there's a lot of lack of hope out here for Eagle fans.
It's been the year of quotes for the Philadelphia fan base. Specifically the Phillies and Middleton and McPhail. They've been throwing the funny ones out there, but quarterback factory is a joke of a comment, really. It's funny to think about. They drafted in the same round, just a couple picks before, Darius Slayton. And I know once you get farther down in the draft, it's harder to hit on some guys. It's a crapshoot. But they picked Clayton Thorson in that round, just a couple picks above Darius Slayton. Could you imagine having him on the team instead of Clayton Thorson, who barely lasted however long he lasted?
Quarterback factory.
Quarterback factory. Have you seen anything out of this franchise that tells you quarterback factory?
Here's the problem. It depends on your definition of it.
That's true.
Because here's the problem. Under their definition, they're wrong. Because they have said multiple times that they want to have multiple top-tier quarterbacks on their roster. That's their claim. The problem is that Wentz has regressed to the point where I don't even know if he's a top 15 quarterback anymore. Jalen Hurts, we don't even know what he is yet. And Nate Sudfeld is gone after this year. They're going to cut him and cut bait.
Yeah, he's another one. Quarterback factor.
But if you go by the definition of the last 20 years and the fact that you've had guys like A.J. Feely and Kevin Cobb and Sam Bradford and these different quarterbacks who you brought in here and you parlayed them for top picks, maybe you've been able to factor draft picks out of the quarterbacks. But I don't think that makes you a quarterback factory. It just means that you're opportunistic to say, hey, we got something out of this guy, let's trade him. It doesn't make you a quarterback factory. It just means that you were able to create draft picks out of quarterbacks.
Yeah, quarterback factory to me says you have guys that you have in your system that develop into something special. You have the tools to make these guys grow into something that can compete at a high level in this league. Getting Nate Sudfeld, Clayton Thorson, Jalen Hurts, just because you pick quarterbacks, it doesn't mean that you actually excel at the factory side of things. So whatever. I mean, that quote is just a joke of a quote from this franchise, but it's funny to laugh at and painful at the same time, may I add.
Absolutely.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. 97.3 ESPN presents the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew Dicecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
We recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew Dicecco covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com and the InsideTheBirds.com. Eagles lose to the Cowboys. Playoff hopes are over, but they can still ruin things for Washington. No Dwayne Haskins for Washington moving forward. It's going to be either Alex Smith or Taylor Hennig, or depending on what sports station you listen to. Apparently the guy has 2 or 3 different pronunciations of his name. Feel bad for that guy. We'll get more into the Eagles and what it means for this team coming up next, as they are now officially out of the playoffs with Andrew Dicecco as all guests. He appears on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Josh. Lots to talk about here, so it's I don't know where the Eagles go from here.
I don't think any of us really know, so let's at least focus on what we do know. One of the things we do know is that the Eagles, once Fletcher Cox left the game, were outscored 34-3. Now, we know Fletcher Cox is an important player for this team, but getting outscored 34-3, how much of that really was the defense, and how much of that was the offense failing?
Well, I think it was a culmination of things. I mean, what we saw yesterday was a 2-week Band-Aid that can no longer mask the litany of deficiencies on that football team. Look, the offensive game plan was largely flawed, and Pederson again struggled to combat Dallas' second-half adjustments. The team demonstrated a lack of readiness and discipline again. An undermanned defense didn't help themselves with missed tackles and blown assignments. By the time Jim Schwartz adjusted and got Michael Jacquet out of the game, it was too late. And aside from a strong opening, the quarterback play wasn't good enough. He was pressing once the defense settled in and adapted, and he fumbled twice. That's essentially the Eagles' 2020 season personified.
Yeah, when I look at Doug Pederson, because he to me was such a huge problem yesterday, the biggest. 4-6 2 years ago, 5-7 last year, and they battled back. It was great. They find the ways to win 4 straight games or win a bunch of games to put them in playoff contention. This year, they fell short of that. Is this what Doug Pederson is? This is what he does. He fall behinds early, and then he rallies the troop, which, give him credit, the troops do rally in terms of staying involved with his, mentality and his message, but it's not sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable, and he routinely struggles to make these adjustments, and you have to wonder, is his voice getting stale? Is that message no longer resonating in that locker room? You can only kind of just have to play December football and have your backs against the wall so many times before teams are like, okay, eventually that's not going to work. That's not a winning formula. And, in my opinion, I think it's time for a change at the head coaching spot, and I don't know if that happens. Ultimately, if you listen to Doug Pederson today, he seemed pretty confident that he was going to be back. But, I think it's best for everyone involved if they move forward with a new head coach.
How much do you really think, though, is Doug, and how much of it is things outside Doug's control? Because I just have to wonder. I always ask this question when it comes to sports. Yeah, okay, you fired fill in the blank coach, but is the person you're replacing him with actually going to be better than said coach? And I'm really worried that if the Eagles were to move on from Doug, do you get a guy in here and that guy falls flat on his face?
Yeah, well, there's always going to be that concern, Josh, when you any head coaching positions. But otherwise, if you have that mindset, why make a coaching change at all in any franchise? There's always going to be that risk that grass may not always be greener on the other side of the fence. But I think right now, when you look at some of the things that they can do, their hands are certainly tied with what they can do with Carson Wentz. And I think you need to get a new head coach in there, get a new voice, bring a new staff in there. And, depending on who you're moving forward with, getting kind of rehabilitating in the case of Carson Wentz and, maybe just reaffirming some things that Jalen Hurts does well and working on some of the things that he doesn't do well, such as ball security and pressing like he did yesterday. So I think that's what's needed for this football team.
Is there a name out there that intrigues you? Of course, Bieniemy is one, and a lot of people are starting to pick out at some of the Kansas City coaching staffs. But is there a name out there? Because everyone's going to be in play for a Bieniemy. So, is there a name out there for you?
Yeah, I like Brian Dable with the Buffalo Bills. I think he's done a really nice job with Josh Allen. Arthur Smith with the Tennessee Titans. He was a first-year play caller, I believe, last season, and you saw what he's done with that. I think he's ready to take that next step. The guy who I really like is Mike Kafka, the OC for the Kansas City Chiefs. But, why would he move? I don't necessarily know if he's ready to make the leap yet, and why would he move to come over here for an offensive coordinator position? He's being groomed in Kansas City, I think, to be Andy Reid's eventual successor. So those are just a couple of names for offensive coordinator. I like Graham Harrell, the OC at USC.
Andrew Dicecco joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at @Dicecco NFL. Andrew, speaking of the coaches, we were talking with Scott Grayson an hour ago, and he mentioned he thinks Doug Pederson keeps his job, and maybe Jim Schwartz loses his job. Do you have a personal perspective on who you would rather keep if you had to remove one of them from the picture? Would it be Schwartz or would it be Pederson?
Well, and I can certainly see where Scott's coming from there, but you have to look at Jim Schwartz and what he's had to work with. I mean, he was playing with Michael Jacquet out there. He was playing with Kayvon Wallace, Mark Epps, Joe Bocci, who a lot of people don't even know who number 59 was, T.Y. McGill. I mean, that's not necessarily players that you want out there for 5 snaps a game, let alone, the amount that they were playing, 18 to 20, and in some cases more. I think he's done a decent job masking some of the areas of the deficiencies and making it a respectable defense. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors involved with Jim Schwartz, but I think if you're picking between the two, I think it's got to be Doug that you have to look to move on from, because the overall structure of the team, and their lack of readiness, their undisciplined play that continuously happens, I think you have to look at Doug.
I would agree with you. With Jim Schwartz, everyone sees the 37 points and they say, oh, the loss is on the defense. But it's pretty damning to see you score 14 points early and then on this specific defense only be able to get 3 more points. I mean, it just can't happen. But you mentioned the lack of discipline. And Isaac Seumalo had a couple penalties. Zach Ertz had a couple penalties. And with Fletcher Cox, he's someone who stands out to me as someone who will battle through injury. But with the stinger, with the season on the line, I'm not questioning his toughness because he's in that category of Kelsey, Lane Johnson to me where he battles through things. But you look at some of the veterans in this core, and it's a little concerning to me to know that there was a little bit of lack of discipline with those guys specifically.
Yeah, you're right. And I guess it's fair to wonder if some of those guys may have checked out. I mean, you're seeing these errors coming from veteran players. This is a playoff game for this team. This is a must-win game. And to come out and execute so poorly, I mean, that speaks to just the overall lack of discipline and that all stems from the head coach. I mean, you can't have veteran players routinely make these mistakes. I mean, it's going to happen here and there, but I mean, there was one point where it was just back to back to back. It's like, what's going on here? It was like you're stuck in neutral.
There was a few weeks ago, Broads and I were on the air together, and I threw out the bizarro world theory of what if you kept Jim Schwartz, made him the head coach, and brought in an offensive coordinator, and Schwartz would do the OC what Doug has done to Jim, which is say, hey, you run the offense, I'll take care of the defense, and maybe that job would be appealing to someone like a Graham Harrell or someone to say, listen, the offense is all yours, just let me run my defense.
I think that would not be the best route to go, getting a retread. I mean, we've seen what Jim Schwartz is as a head coach. It didn't quite work out in Detroit. I think that if you bring in any head coach, offensive-minded in particular, they're only going to come here if you offer them, they're going to bring their staff in there. And I think that's the route that they need to go. There's a lot of guys out there that would, kind of remodel that whole offense and make it much more fluid than what it is. And like Hunter was saying, I think Jim Schwartz has done a decent job given what he's had to work with. So I think that he ultimately stays on board, and I think you need to look at a new guy, a new head coach that's going to have a new voice for this team.
I mean, Jim Schwartz was one of only 2 coaches in the last 20 years to get the Lions to the postseason, so maybe he's not totally horrible as a head coach, but I digress, Hunter.
Yeah, when I look at this, and I looked at Jalen Hurts' performance, it felt like what I saw with Carson Wentz, as if the head coaching was a problem, getting away from the game plan. You saw it work in the first drive. Then they elected to not run the ball. 8 carries in the first quarter for Sanders, 7 the rest of the way. The offensive line abysmal. Skill players not playing good. So it just felt like the surrounding pieces, similar to what I said when Wentz was under center, was happening with Hurts as well. And that's not to take away some of the flaws that he had personally, but I really did feel like the spark, the fuse, it went away, and you saw the natural issues again with this football team, and it really hurt Jalen Hurts' play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, Hunter. When you have a quarterback like Carson Wentz, who pretty much fell off a cliff this season, there was a clear regression. Then you look at Jalen Hurts, and you're seeing some of the same errors start to happen. you almost want to, if you do move forward with either quarterback, which one you go forward with, you almost want Doug Pederson and Press Taylor and those guys as far away from these guys as possible, because they're making similar mistakes, and that stems from coaching.
You mentioned Press Taylor. I still don't understand why this guy has a job on this team, aside from the fact that supposedly, him and I think Doug Pederson have the same agent or something like that. But he was a Chip Kelly guy. I mean, is this guy a legitimate NFL coach, or is he just hanging around because he knows the right people?
Well, based on what I've seen, I mean, it's not working here in Philadelphia. It's not for me to say if he's an NFL quality coach, but I mean, it's not working here. Whatever role they put him in, I think it's time to look. You got that's an area that if they do keep Doug Pederson on board, you got to get an offensive coordinator in there, and you have to get a new quarterbacks coach. That has to be the first things that happen.
And it definitely does seem how Doug has been talking. It does seem like him and Jeffrey Lurie had the conversation where he seems comfortable with stating being part of the solution. But the last question of his press conference today stood out to me. The question was asked by Rob Motti, and it was about him being more involved with some of the evaluation stuff. And this was his response. I want to get your thoughts. Doug wants to be a part of the solution, a part of the evaluation process, a voice that is heard. Communication with Howie and his staff is important in terms of the personnel. Is that just a bad answer by Doug because he's naturally bad in front of the microphone? Or is he telling us he doesn't have much say when it comes to the roster, and it's not as much of a collaboration as we thought?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Hunter. I think it's one of those deals where he was trying to voice him, like he was trying to be vocal without throwing Howie Roseman under the bus. That was coaches speak for, hey, I can get me involved here and let me have some say in who's going to be on this football team. And he said, I can be a part of the solution. And that's kind of how I took that, is give him a little bit more say, a little bit more authority in who he can have on his football team. And he believes that he can spearhead it, helps redirect it in the right direction.
Now, considering that right direction, the Eagles are no longer in the postseason. So what is a legitimate expectation of this team heading into a game that is the most strange situation I've ever seen? Mm-hmm. You have them being flexed in the Sunday Night Football. One of the two teams has no chance at the postseason. So in all to the purpose, the Eagles could just go out there and be like, we're not playing anybody, and hand Washington the division. Or they could turn around and say, we're going to play everybody. We beat the Washington. We take them out of the division, but it means nothing for us. I mean, what is a legitimate expectation of this team as we're 6 days away from arguably the most important meaningless game in the history of the franchise?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be Jalen Hurts going up against Taylor Heineke. And I saw earlier today that Terry McLaurin has a high ankle sprain. So that's their top receiver. That's one of their.
He's in a walking boot, Andrew. He's in a walking boot. I mean, what the heck's going on here?
And that's one of the guys you're going to tune in to see, of course, and Antonio Gibson over there. But, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I had to guess, Josh, what I think is going to happen, they're not just going to go out there and make it a preseason finale. I think that they're going to make it more like the dress rehearsal, a third preseason game where you see the starters play a decent amount, and then you're going to see them start to kind of give way for some of these young guys, these Michael Jacquettes, the Joe Bocci's, the Sean Bradley, if he's available. Davion Taylor might be available next week. Kayvon Wallace, Marcus Epps, Elijah Riley, the backup safety. I think you're going to see some of those guys start to get worked in there so that they have some tape on these guys, just game action, and they can see where they're at and they can evaluate from there.
All right, you mentioned the young guys. What have you seen out of Jalen Reagor? Because I was someone who was intrigued by his skill set. Everyone wrote him off because he wasn't Justin Jefferson without even seeing him play. That bothered me. I said, give the kid some time, and I'm not writing him off. But I think it's fair to say, even though he had an injury, he has been very underwhelming. And I don't know if you see something in the route running, but it does seem like there's always this miscommunication, as if he's not giving it his all or he's not breaking the right way. There is something off with Jalen Reagor. So what do you see?
Well, I agree with you. I remember before the season, you and I were very intrigued by Jalen Reagor. I actually thought that he was going to be utilized similar to how the 49ers used Deebo Samuel. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Some of that's on Jalen being injured, and some of that is just flat out he's not making the plays when he's in position to make the plays. He doesn't have the necessary play strength. He gets squeezed on on these vertical routes. He doesn't fight for position with the football. You saw yesterday when he got the ball in open field, he's supposed to be an open field specialist. He had a convoy of blockers in front of him, and he ran right into the tackle. When I look at Jalen Reagor, I don't see a first-round talent. I just don't see that special quality. Do you expect every first-round pick to go out there and be a Justin Jefferson? Of course not. But you at least want to see some flashes of somebody who's special. And I'm just not seeing that from Jalen Reagor. He's not running NFL. He doesn't look like he's ready to run NFL routes. And his body language is terrible. And these are areas of concern when you're evaluating your first-round pick. I mean, to me, that he could have been that what you're seeing on the field, you could get that in the third or fourth or fifth round. I mean, Quez Watkins is a more explosive player at this stage in both of their careers.
So then how much of what we're seeing from Reagor also falls back on coaching? Because you mentioned Rager's body language. We saw Matt Pryor not once but twice but 3 times have false starts. Sayamalo in the dumbest hold I've seen this season. I mean, how much of the problems we're seeing from the players with the body language and the mistakes also should fall on the coaching?
Yeah, but in regards to Reagor, I mean, his immediate, the guy who he reports to is Aaron Moorhead. And how many times are you going to keep swapping out receivers coaches? I believe they went through 6 in 6 years before you have to look at, is it a coaching issue or is it a talent issue? Is it an evaluation issue? I mean, in the case of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I think it was a poor evaluation for sure. And I think that when you look at Jalen Reagor, some of the mistakes that he's making, I mean, you're not seeing guys like Quez Watkins make those mistakes. And he was a 6th-round pick. Jalen Reagor, it just doesn't seem like a polished product. And I don't know if there's any kind of coaching that can solve, poor body language. And, Jalen has to want to get better. And he seems like a hardworking kid. And this offseason is going to be extremely telling. But, it's hard to put all that on coaching. And you have to give some of the accountability to the player.
Keeping it with the wide receivers, Deshaun Jackson, this debacle. One play, it's outstanding. You get the home run hit. He does the front flip in the end zone. You never see him again. What is this Deshaun Jackson debacle?
Yeah, as soon as I saw that play, as soon as I saw him do that flip, I said, well, I guess we're not going to see him again because, knowing his history, you're like, well, I guess we'll see Deshaun in another uniform, and thanks for the memories. But he played 20 snaps. Doug Pederson said that the flip didn't translate to his soreness that held him out for the majority of that game. But I think the Deshaun. You can close the book on the Deshaun era here in Philadelphia. I think that's kind of run its course. It wasn't what either party really expected to get out of the reuniting, and I think that you just gotta make way for these younger players and thank him for his time and what he's done for the franchise and move on because it's just not working out.
Yeah, for me, I think the more important takeaway from what's happening with Deshaun here in this last game and Fletcher is the message. So Fletch, it's all right, take your pads off. With Deshaun, it's all right, you're going to sit down. The message sent to these younger players, to the team is we're in a playoff spot. You guys, hey, take a seat. You're off for the night. I mean, what type of message is that? That's what bothers me. Don't you want to go out there and compete, show everybody else that this is a game that matters? It didn't seem like the sense of urgency was there from the veterans, and to me, that is such a big problem.
Yeah, it is, and you can even look further back when Jason Peters went into Doug Peterson's office and said, he wanted to play, left tackle, or he wanted to raise, whatever it was, and you just have a lot of entitlement with some of these veteran players, and I think that it sends such a poor message to a young player. We talked about Jalen Reagor's body language. Well, how do you think something like that is going to resonate with a young player? Some of these veterans need to lead by example, and you're not necessarily seeing that. And I think that whole leadership, that goes back to what we were talking about in the open. That goes back to it's all tied directly to the head coach and the message that's being told to the locker room.
Andrew Dicecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at @Dicecco NFL. Also check out all of his coverage of the Eagles at 97.3 ESPN.com and InsideTheBirds.com. Now, Andrew, you also cover the NFL draft. So with all that being said, Currently, the Eagles are projected to hold the 6th overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. I've seen 2 mock drafts that say the Eagles would be taking Patrick Surtain from Alabama. Now, I love the pick because I think Surtain is the best corner in college football, but you cover the NFL Draft. You've been doing it for years. How do you feel about Surtain, and is there another person who would be available at 6 overall that would intrigue you possibly more?
Well, depending on how things shake out this week, the Eagles could have as high as the number 3 overall pick. In that case, I would go with the offensive tackle Penei Sewell from Oregon. Now, at pick 6, I think you need to look at everyone's enamored with the Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith from Alabama. There's too many holes. You have to go for, in my opinion, cornerback, or maybe a guy like a Micah Parsons, because the Eagles right now, just look at the depth chart. They have no building blocks on defense. They have 0 building blocks. Everyone that's there, that's a prominent player on that unit, is on the back end of their NFL careers, or on the back 9. So I like Patrick Surtain. I also like J.C. Horn from South Carolina. Surtain is just an instinctive, nosy defender. He can cover, he can flip his hips and run, and he has that. His father, of course, was Patrick Surtain, and so I think he's NFL ready and a plug and play guy. He's obviously played at a high level in college, and in my opinion, it's got to be either him, J.C. Horn, Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech. It's got to be one of those guys, because you saw what happened yesterday when you don't have a competent number 2. You can move Darius Slay around all you want to, but when they have that guy on the other side, they're going to keep attacking him until the Eagles find an answer.
Now, you mentioned Chase and Sewell and Parsons. Those are guys who they didn't see a lot of action this year. You didn't get a lot of tape on them this year. So how does that change potential evaluations for those guys? Because if you don't got game tape on them for a year, that might change how people perceive them.
Yeah, I think that would more so hurt guys that were first-round tweeners, back-end guys, fringe first-round guys. But when you put the body of work out there that Jamar Chase did on a national platform, and just be that unique skill set of a Micah Parsons who really fits the mold of what the NFL is really becoming on defense. He can play linebacker, but you can put him in the slot. He can match up with these hybrid tight ends and cover running backs out of the backfield. He's just a movable chess piece. And on a defense that's really getting older and a little long in the tooth and doesn't really have any building blocks, as I mentioned, I think that he needs consideration there.
He's Andrew Dicecco. Give him a follow on Twitter, @Dicecco NFL. He joins us each Monday here at Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. This week, Andrew will be back with us on Wednesday for Football at 4. Jeff Mosher will jump on a Tuesday. So we'll hear from Andrew one more time on Wednesday as we start looking ahead to the Washington football team. And nobody knows who's actually playing for Washington. So it'll be a fun conversation, Andrew.
Fun and interesting for sure.
Have a good one.
You too, guys.
Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and then match your first buys up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sports book along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Back to your text on the other side, 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, 609-403-0973, and anytime hotline calls along with Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, affiliate for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill along with Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at Broads81. I'm at Josh Hennig on Twitter. I'll be here the next couple of days, today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. Tomorrow, Deshaun's filling in for you. And then you got you back on Wednesday.
Yes, I will be back on Wednesday.
How you feel about that?
It's a nice time of the year to have. The fiance's off for a couple of weeks. She took off with some vacation time. So it'll be a nice, day and then the back end of the week to kind of kick back and relax. But I miss talking sports. I love doing it every day. So it's a conflicting feeling, that's all. Love working with you, Josh. You know what else I love? DraftKings. To celebrate this year's college football playoffs, DraftKings is giving all new users the chance to bet on any semifinal team to win the championship at 100-1 odds. That's right. All you have to do is bet $1 on any semifinal team to win the championship. And if your team wins, you cash $100. Let's not forget about the 2021 basketball season that just kicked off. So head to the app now and check out all their daily odds boosts. Use promo code 973 when you sign up on the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey. Only gambling problem. Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
So here we go. Tonight on 97.3 ESPN, you got the Patriots versus the Bills. On Monday football, tomorrow night, you got the Sixers back in action taking on the Raptors. And today, Daryl Morey got fined by the NBA. Did you see this?
Yeah, it's a little wild.
So I am growing when it first happened, I wanted the process to get a little more information. But as the hours have passed and I know more information now, the more I'm annoyed by it. So for those who don't know, Daryl Morey was fined, and here's the official NBA statement. The NBA has announced they have fined Daryl Morey, 76ers president of basketball operations, $50,000 for violating the league's anti-tampering rule. The fine was in response to a since-deleted social media post Daryl Morey made on December 20th regarding the Houston Rockets' James Harden. That's the official NBA. Now, for those who don't know, Twitter, Facebook, they have this thing where, like, if you have memories, you can say auto-post or don't auto-post. And maybe someone like Daryl Morey didn't realize the auto-post function was on. And so he auto-posted this memory from a couple of years ago about James Harden. Once he realized that, he deleted it. So the NBA has got to send a message about Daryl Morey's accidental tweet. But when Adam Silver was asked about James Harden and why they didn't suspend him for his off-the-court stuff, Adam Silver's answer was, well, it's Christmas time. We didn't want to be too hard. I'm so confused. What is the NBA doing here?
Yeah, it's a weird message. One guy actually did something horrendous. Let's be realistic in terms of protocols and making sure everything's safe and you want your teammates to be healthy. And with COVID going out to a strip club, wherever he was, he claimed that it wasn't, but whatever. They all claim that. He was somewhere he shouldn't have been without a mask, and that is significantly way worse than an accidental tweet from an auto post of a memory when he worked with the Houston Rockets. So how is one man getting fined $50K and the other guy getting off scot-free and dropping 44 and 18, was it the other night? 44 points, 18 assists? It was something of that nature for James Harden.
He had a strange night, too, because he started the game basically being able to hit anything, and he turned into this assist machine, which was fine for me because I had bet the over and they hit the over.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you had a good weekend for sure.
I had my priorities. I didn't care about Harden scoring. I just cared about the team scoring. But anyway.
As you should. But since we're on hoops, I think it is a good time to maybe bring up what we saw out of the 76ers this weekend. I know you were frustrated.
Such a strange weekend because Saturday night, I was like, all right, they're going to beat the Knicks, right? I mean, the Knicks have been rough. We knew Obi Toppin wasn't going to play. He was injured. So you figured the Knicks would have enough firepower. And they were comfortably winning the game, and they kind of let the Knicks back into it, and it was like weird at the end. But you're like, all right, you beat the Knicks. The Cavs the same night had a massive game, and you're like, whoa, like what are the Cavs doing? Like, you know, they were just running all over the place. And so then you play the Sixers next night. You're like, all right, maybe it'll be a competitive game, right? I expect the Sixers to get just kicked in the face by the Cavs. I mean, what the heck happened there?
Are you bothered by Embiid not playing? Here's the thing. I know this is what the league does. Kevin Durant's not playing tonight. Kyrie Irving's not playing tonight. Guys are resting all over the place. This is just reality and the nature of the beast of the NBA. But I feel with Embiid, I'm just so tired and so fatigued of this. And I knew that it was nitpicking at the time, but when the preseason was going on, it was the second preseason game. They only had 2. Well, he felt sick, so he didn't play. And I didn't care about that specific preseason game, but I thought that would be, when we look back at it, a microcosm of what's going to happen. He's going to sit out here. He's not going to play there. He's going to be sick this night, banged up here. I'm tired of it. I really am. It's annoying to me at this point, and I think they need to do a better job of it. And you could see that whether this is right or wrong, the entire mentality of the team shifted when they realized the big man wasn't going to go.
Even if Embiid's not out there, you still should win the game. I don't care. I mean, I know how talented Garland and Sexton are. Everyone's trying to come up with nicknames for the dynamic duo.
Yeah, they just didn't compete. If they competed and lost, it's a different story. They just lost. It happens. But they didn't even want to work hard.
I mean, when your highlight is Tobias Harris at 16 points, that's not a highlight. That's a low light. Like, if Joel Embiid is in the lineup, Simmons and Harris should both have around 20 points. Dwight Howard should have a double-double.
He got into foul trouble. They called 3 fouls on him in the first half.
One of those fouls was weak as heck.
So weak. And then he picked up his fourth with 10:44 to go in the second half. So you were put in a tough spot. You tried Mike Scott at the 5. You tried Ben Simmons at the 5. They went with Bradley early. He couldn't get one putback. And Doc said after the game, did you hear him? He said Joel Embiid was such a late scratch that they didn't even properly get to assess what they wanted to do with the big man.
I mean, first of all, why is he on such a late scratch? Whose fault is that?
Back tightness, I guess. I guess the plan was for him to play, which I'm stunned by, because it felt like naturally this was going to be what they were going to do regardless.
Well, there was a vibe. I don't know if you heard any of the radio broadcasts, but I heard my Sixers experience Saturday night was half radio, half television. Okay? And Tom McGinnis kind of hinted at a side comment like, Joel, he's a little slow there on the movement. I wonder if, what's going on there. I mean, just a little throwaway comment, right? And at the end of the Sixers television broadcast, they even mentioned on the television broadcast that back-to-back tomorrow, we don't know who's going to play or not. So I kind of already had this feeling that maybe Embiid wouldn't play, at least as a consumer on the outside. I'm not an insider. I'm not in the locker room. I'm not like Paul Hudrick, our 76ers insider, who has sources. I had a feel that maybe Embiid wouldn't play. So when Doc Rivers says he was a late scratch, I kind of feel like, how did I know that he wasn't playing, but you didn't?
Right. It seemed like more just coach speak and backing up the organization more so than reality. But look, 21 turnovers that resulted in 35 Cavalier points. The transition play was garbage. They couldn't ever create any sort of a great passing sequence on a fast break. It resulted in a turnover. And when you look at what the Cavs were doing, I didn't see one shot that they had to really work for, where it was a hard possession, where they had to earn the 2 points. Everything was so easy, getting to the rack with ease or moving the basketball. You swing it around the perimeter, you get a wide open look. You had JaVale McGee hitting threes, Larry Nance Jr. hitting threes. You had so many guys hit threes, Osman hitting threes. It was a joke. The effort wasn't there, and I hate to pull this card, but I'm going to because of what I've heard over the last handful of years. I was told that was a Brett Brown problem. 21 turnovers is a Brett Brown problem. Not being mentally prepared was a coaching problem. And to a degree, I do believe that. But my point has always been, and when you bring in Doc Rivers, not everything switches and changes that easily. I was informed that this would stop by a lot of this fan base when you change the coach. And clearly, that's not reality.
And I think this is where I'm starting to feel more and more like Ben Simmons isn't a point guard.
Really?
Because you look at the starters. Those 21 turnovers, 15 were by the starters.
Yes.
6 were by Ben Simmons.
Correct.
So I'm starting to wonder, is Ben Simmons really a point guard or is he a point forward? Because I think maybe the solution to fix some of this is maybe to take either Green or Curry out of the starting lineup and put Shake Milton in there and let Shake be the primary ball handler.
I don't think they want to do that. I really do think they want to groom Shake into that role and say, I want you to excel in this role. Now, I'm not saying it would be a horrendous move by any means. I think it could have benefits, but then I think it weakens what your bench can possibly be, and I think that they value that. I'm just basing this off of Doc Rivers' history. You had Jamal Crawford. You had Lou Will. It's just the style that he likes to operate with, so I'm with you, and it does seem pretty early. Danny Green goes to the bench, and you bring in Shake Milton first, so that is part of the rotation where Shake Milton is coming off the bench, but he's getting, decent amount of minutes off the bench that he's out there, and you're qualified, and, you're valuing his ability and what he brings to the table. I think they want him to be that guy because he can excel, and then you have a good advantage with the six-man role compared to other matchups.
You may want that, but then you got to do something about Ben Simmons.
See, I don't think one game. Like I've seen this before.
But it's
I
not
get it.
one game.
I get it, but I needed more. I need to see it more this season to say this is who he is forever. Even though it's a frustrating performance.
But hear me out. In 3 games, Ben Simmons has 13 turnovers this year. He had 6 alone on Sunday. You know how many turnovers on the season those 3 games Shake Milton has? 6.
Yeah, but how much of that has to do with Ben and this new offense and a new team and a new system and him just trying to get a vibe on how how these players are going to be spaced out, how you're going to operate with these different sets? I think a lot of that has to do with him getting a feel on how he is going to run this offense.
But the only reason I don't agree with that is because of the fact that when I look at him on the court, he's not making good decisions at times. Like, if you're not sure about yourself and your teammates, maybe you make the easy pass instead of the hard pass. Maybe you do a handoff instead of a pass across court. But there are times he's making passes and there's no reason for them to make those passes. So is that really him learning the offense and learning his teammates? Or is that him trying to make a play when there's not a play to be made?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's him trying to learn his teammates, trying to learn, okay, where are people going to be at a certain point after running certain action. And I also think that a lot of it has to do with him being Ben Simmons and, trying to make that beautiful pass, having that facilitation be the first part of his game. But I do want to point out something that I did think was really big from Doc Rivers from this past weekend, and this was the game against, what was there, so many games over the weekend. What was the...
Saturday was the Knicks.
Yes, the
and
game
the
prior
before
to
was the Wizards.
The Wizards game. Yes, so there was a lot of, it was like the last 5 or 6 minutes of the game where they ran the same action over and over and over again, nonstop, back to back to back to back, and they didn't have a solution. So it was Joel Embiid setting the pick, and then after Embiid sets the pick, Ben Simmons cuts back door. And they either did a fake pick and roll, they didn't even use the screen from Embiid, Shake Milton went to the left, got fouled, or it worked to a pass to Tobias Harris for 3, or Joel Embiid got the rock in the low post, or he faced up the basket. You just had so many looks coming off of the same action in the last 5 minutes. That is something we haven't seen from the Brett Brown era that really stood out to me, where it says, okay, you just got a ton of respect from me in that moment, but similar to what we've been saying about Hurts, once people have film and they say, okay, Doc Rivers likes to utilize this certain set with these 2 players, how then do you make the adjustments and move forward with something else, something new, where you can still get good looks?
I hear what you're saying, but I'm just wondering, is Ben Simmons really the guy to be the floor general for this team? I'm just asking the question.
That's his best skill set.
Is it though?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's his best defense. Defense might be his best.
To me, his best skill set is his defense.
Okay, but offensively, his best skill set is finding his teammates. I mean, last year, with horrendous spacing and garbage shooting, he led the league in assists, resulting in 3-pointers.
That is true.
So, I mean, he obviously sees the floor well. There's got to be something to new team, new system, new coach, and what you're seeing early on. And I'm with you. There's frustration boiling with all of us because it seems to be a common theme. But I don't know how you take the ball out of someone's hands who thrives with passing the basketball.
Well, like you and I said last week, we both agreed we were not going to take grandiose judgments off the Sixers from 1 or 2 games. So that's why I'm asking questions instead of making statements.
That's true. Yeah, 20-game window is where I think we can sit back after 20 and say, okay, Josh, what do we have here? That's a reasonable number.
Yeah, which means we need 17 more games.
Exactly. Before you know it, guess what? We'll be at game 62. I mean, the year's just flying by, all of it. The Eagles season ends next Sunday. Can you believe it? It's scary.
People want to talk about the Eagles. We'll get to those texts coming up in just a bit at 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, 609-403-0973, Sports Bash. Being brought to you by Delaware Valley Acura Dealers. For more great deals on Acura's award-winning lineup, shop online at DelaValleAcuraDealers.com. Also, anytime hotline calls still to come here on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
609-403-0973. On the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, more of your anytime hotline calls in the next hour. A couple texts to get to. First of all, Nick from Bragantine says, should the Eagles play for the number 3 pick next weekend? In theory, if they lose again, they have a shot at the most at the 3rd overall pick. The problem with that way of thinking is players don't think like that. Players don't tank. And also, this isn't the NBA. There isn't this great chasm between the 3rd pick and the 6th pick.
No, it's not to that level, especially, but you don't really know the quarterback spot right now when it comes to this football team. But normally, when you have the quarterback down, it's totally different because those higher picks, teams like to trade up, try and get their guy and, get that franchise-changing move. But maybe I'm in the outlier. I don't know if I even want them to lose. I get that that's something that you look at in terms of, okay, the future. And like I said, maybe I'm in the outlier, but I can't sit there and say, I really hope you guys just look like garbage and lose. If it happens naturally, then so be it. But it's hard for me to say, go out there, compete, and lose. It's hard for me. And I'm sure that people are freaking out at their radio right now going, what do you mean? You got to get the high draft pick.
No, you don't have to get the high draft pick. Trust me, there is not a huge difference between 3, 6, and 9. It's the NFL. You can find players anywhere. This isn't the NBA where there's 5 good players. That's it. All right? The NFL, there's a reason why Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round. You know who was drafted ahead of him? Giovanni Carmazzi. You care who Giovanni Carmazzi is? Of course you don't. All right? You care who Spiro Wynn is? Of course you don't. You don't have to find a player just in the top 3 picks. Now, my concern with the Eagles is I want to see them go out there and fight. I care less about them winning than about fighting. I want them to go out there and play like their jobs depend on it. I want them to leave me with a positive taste in my mouth about the mentality of these players and this team.
How much stock are you putting into that then? Because I'm with you. I agree completely. I want to see them fight. I want to see that Doug Pederson still has the locker room. So how much stock do you put into that? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
When you say compete, you're tying that to, okay, where does this head coach stand?
Yeah, I want to know, do they still care what Doug and Schwartz say?
Because long-term, that's very important.
It's huge.
So big. Especially,
this organization quit on Chip Kelly in 2015. The players said it. They were tired of Chip. They didn't want to hear Chip anymore. That's why Jeffrey Lurie got rid of him before the end of the season, because he realized how toxic the situation was. I want to know, am I getting another Chip Kelly situation, or do these players really want to play for Doug?
Do you think that Doug has lost the locker room? Now, I don't think he has necessarily lost it all, but I do wonder if the power has regressed a bit.
I don't think he's lost the locker room, but I think there are too many cooks in the kitchen. I think there's too many people with voices in general in that among the coaches.
Now, do you think, because I'm just putting it in perspective this way, all right? So let's say Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, some of these guys are in the locker room listening to Doug Pederson speak. You say there's a lot of voices. Are you saying in that scenario there's offensive assistant coaches voicing their opinion too?
I'll give you an example.
Yeah, give me an example of what you mean.
One of my problems with the Wentz stuff is I have to wonder, does Doug say one thing to Wentz, and then Press Taylor says something else, and then Scangarello says something else, and then on Thursday, Marty Morningweg decides to make an appearance and say something else? Is there times where Doug's message is being diluted because there's other people who are having a say in the players' ears?
Okay, no, that's phenomenal the way that you laid it out. And guess what? I do think that is something that's happening. Of course, these guys have a part of the game plan. They have a part of voicing what they want to do with the run game, with the pass game, with this, with that. I would imagine that these coaches who have been around, some of these have been around in the league. They have called plays before, so they feel like, hold on a second, look at my career. Look at what I've done. I have something in this league, so my voice should be valued. So they feel that they have the right to go out there and talk to some of these guys. I think that absolutely is happening. Now, to what degree, we don't have that information, but to some extent, yes, I think that they are all talking to these players, and maybe that does dilute what Doug says.
Josh Hennig along with Hunter Brody here on the Sports Bash. Final hour of the show, 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill has the day off. So let's run this down real quick. Dwayne Haskins released by the Washington football team. So another Ohio State quarterback doesn't work in the NFL, or at least temporarily doesn't work. We don't know what the future of his career is, but at least right now he's too immature to be an NFL starting quarterback. Then you look over at the Philadelphia Eagles. They're done in the playoffs. They're currently slide 6 for a draft pick. You look around at the Sixers. They have Daryl Morey fined for an inadvertent tweet, which is ridiculous. We're being told that Adam Silver has a bias against Sixers, which I don't know if I can confirm or deny. I mean, I know there's a lot of politics that goes on behind the scenes with things. I do think it's very convenient that he's willing to give a pass to one person, that being James Harden, but not to somebody else. I do think that's a little convenient. And then, at the end of the day, what are we dealing with the Eagles? Everyone's got a thought, like this texter. You guys are insane. It's the second or third game of Jalen Hurts' career. He's going to make mistakes. They're called rookie mistakes, you bleep.
Well, I mean, didn't you see the same exact thing that we saw with Carson Wentz for the most part in this game?
And I said no.
You said it looked worse.
Well, I think the offensive line looked worse.
Definitely. I can agree with that. But my point is, I get what you're saying, but the surrounding cast was a reason why the quarterback struggled. I think if the supporting cast picked up their end of the bargain, you would have saw Jalen Hurts perform better. And with Carson Wentz, while he had self-inflicting wounds and he was poor, just like I thought that there were times where Jalen Hurts was just flat out poor, if the supporting cast picked up their side of things, I thought Carson would have looked better as well. And that's the way I saw it. I thought the supporting cast offensively was just so putrid that Jalen Hurts was the scapegoat of it all with his play.
To me, the big difference, though, is that Wentz made a lot of bad plays that compounded the situation.
For sure.
Hurts wasn't doing that.
That's
yesterday.
fair. Until the end. But at that point, you kind of had to make up for some of the lost time, and you're trying to score some touchdowns.
I do wonder if that interception was really Hurts and if that was the guy who didn't run the right route. Because the one thing I noticed about Hurts in college, and I'm not saying I'm some college football quarterback guru, but from what I saw of him in college, when he had the most trouble, and one of the reasons why he was ultimately benched at Alabama, Hurts is not a good anticipation passer. He's a see-it-and-throw-it guy. You probably heard that term on the Inside the Birds podcast, and guys like Brian Baldinger and other analysts talk about that when evaluating quarterbacks. Greg Cosell talks about it a lot with this see-it-and-throw versus the anticipator. I wonder if Hurts is just not a good anticipation thrower. And I felt like that interception was an anticipation. Like he was anticipating something was going to happen and it didn't. And I think that might just be a flaw in his makeup.
Well, I feel that over the last couple of games prior to this one, he did a good job at, just not so much like anticipating someone to be in a certain area, but allowing his receivers one-on-one. For example, Alshon Jeffrey, go make this play. Just so it's not so much anticipation that he's going to be in a certain area. It's more of a 50-50 ball down the sideline, but he was more willing to allow his receiver to go make a play for him
that's a part of
than
seeing
Wentz.
And throwing it. Like
that's
the
fine.
Receiver is getting open, and then you put it on him and make him make the play.
Right.
Whereas that interception looked like he was expecting something to happen that didn't.
I think, tape study would be something that you'd have to look at to really tell.
I'm just saying it might be a flaw in his game in general. Like, there are certain quarterbacks, they just never develop the great anticipation skills. Like, Aaron Rodgers can do anything.
Yeah,
Tom
he's
Brady
special.
can do anything. But what's the biggest difference between Rodgers and Brady? Rodgers almost never throws interceptions. He's almost obsessed with not throwing interceptions. Brady, he'll force the ball in there sometimes. He'll make a throw when he's not supposed to. And he gets mad at himself. He gets mad at everybody else. Whereas Rodgers, he just does the eye roll, then says, we'll try again. If it doesn't work out, he'll take the sack. So maybe a certain quarterback, they just have a tendency. And maybe Hurts' tendency is he's just never going to be a great anticipation thrower.
Yeah, it's a little early, but I'm with you. I do think that that's something that he can work on. Now, I wrote down a couple drives that stood out to me, and this kind of reflects Doug Pederson. I want to get your thoughts on it. So it was the third quarter, 2 minutes and 2 seconds to go. They had great field position. They forced the Cowboys to punt the ball, so they had good field position, a little bit on their side of the 50, but very, very good spot to start. It was a 3rd and 5, and Miles Sanders was wide open. Jalen Hurts was running towards the sideline. He probably could have dumped it off to Miles Sanders, didn't, and then it ended up being 4th and 3 at Dallas's 46. There was a delay of game, which made it 4th and 8, and Doug Pederson elected to punt. This was 30 to 17 was the score at this point. So he elected to punt there. I thought Doug Pederson, knowing the defense was getting shredded, probably still would have went for it. Later on, Darius Slay gets the interception. It gets all the way down to 4th and 15, and they went for it there. So it's like you're not going for it on 4th and 8, but you're going to go for it on 4th and 15 instead of kicking a field goal to make it a 10-point game. This could be a reach, but I'm just looking at the message. I don't like the message. And then on that 4th and 15 play, they throw it under the sticks by a lot to Zach Ertz, a guy who we all yell at, doesn't get any yards after the catch. So what was going on there? I just thought that was a big-time mishap by the head coach.
And that's where I have to wonder, is there somebody in his ear telling him, well, on 4th and 8 in this time of the game, in this situation, the analytics say you should go for it or not go for it. And instead of Doug maybe having football sense, he's listening to too much of voices and numbers in his head.
Well, he's always doing that. I mean, when it comes to going for two, analytics, this and that, he doesn't really analyze the information. He just does what he's told. So I do think that the number game and people telling him things in his ear absolutely plays a role in how Doug Pederson coaches.
Back to the question I was asking earlier. Does Doug have the wrong people in his ear? Are the people giving him the information
I think this here's to answer your question.
Yeah.
I think this happens all around the league.
Oh, I know it does.
Yeah, so
but what I'm saying is that there might be a difference between Rich Scangarello and Press Taylor saying it to Doug versus Frank Reich and John DiFilippo taking the same information and maybe translating it into Doug's ear differently.
But I don't think that when someone's telling you what to do based off analytics, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't think Press Taylor's the one telling Doug analytical information. I don't think that anybody else in this coaching tree is. I think they have an analytical team upstairs that says, Doug, this is what you do there. I could be wrong, but I don't know if it's Press Taylor who has the analytical
data. I don't think it's literally him, but I mean, it's the idea that you hire somebody to help you do a job, right? And then maybe that person isn't helping you properly.
Right. It's like the Dodgers using analytics differently than the Phillies using analytics. Some teams utilize it in a better way.
You talked about the Rays with Blake Snell. He just got traded to the Padres, right? If the Padres have Blake Snell, maybe Blake Snell stays in the game for the Rays and helps them win the World Series. The Dodgers and the Rays both were heavy analytical organizations, but they both interpreted it differently.
Yeah, it does seem situational, though, for the analytics and when they use it. Going for two is one where they dive deep into it. Is going for it on 4th and 8 with 3 minutes to go? What time? Maybe they look at what? The FPI that tells you.
There's a chart for everything.
Yeah, they tell you have an X percentage amount of. You have an X percent chance to win the game if you go for it here. If you don't there, I don't know. I hated the situation, though. I've heard
Nick Saban talk about this, how he said, look, there's a chart for everything. There's a stat for everything, he said. But the coach has to make his own decisions, what Nick Saban says. So I'm just saying, maybe it's how people are interpreting things. Maybe it's not. But it's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Because why does Doug go for it on one but not the other? And as you've said, it's hard to trust Doug what he says because he's not great at articulating it anyway. So maybe he's not going to give you the right answer that you're looking for.
Right. If he explains it, you can sit back and go, what are you even talking about? I don't even understand your explanation of it all because you have to question everything they say. Now, there was an earlier series. This one doesn't stand out the same level as the one I just brought up, but Eagles were up 14-3. Cowboys go 3 and out. They go on 3rd and 4, literally run it into the beautiful strength of this defense, so they punt it. So when the Eagles are up 14-3, they have an opportunity to step on the throats of Dallas. And Doug Pederson did the same thing Dallas did. He ran the football a couple times, went 3 and out, and punted. It was almost as if you had a chance to get to move downfield, to score another touchdown, make it 21-3, make a statement early. And instead, it was almost as if he waved the flag on that one drive, as if, let's be conservative this drive, we're up. That goes against everything Doug Pederson lives for. So I thought I know it was early, maybe not as important as later drives in the game. It stood out to me, though, as Doug letting off the gas early when he should have stepped on their throats.
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Sports Bash being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. You want to squeeze in an anytime hotline call here?
Always.
Let's get this one. Here we go.
For all those people, for all the people in the media trashing on Carson Wentz, saying it's all Carson Wentz's fault, this game is the epitome of why this is an organizational dysfunction rather than just a player in Carson Wentz, okay? The fact that everybody tries to blame this just solely on Carson Wentz is just stupid, and they're out of their minds. With Carson Wentz, he's played horrible, and I completely understand that. But if you're going to solely blame this Eagles' demise just on Carson Wentz, you're a flat-out moron. Go Birds.
I do think that there's a crowd of Wentz defenders, and I feel I lean in the Carson Wentz defending category more than some, but I understand that he was a major problem at the same time. Last night there was a lot of, Carson's fault, huh? You're going to blame this one on Carson? And I feel like that reaction is ridiculous. Even coming from someone that has been more in Wentz's corner than most, I don't know. Do you feel the same way as me when you saw a lot of reaction last night of, oh, how are you going to blame this one on Carson? It was almost as if they were being sarcastic about that, and I didn't really like that reaction from some.
I feel like there's an attitude by a percentage of the population of fans. Not everybody, but the caller is right, I should say. There's a group of people who are using these games as an opportunity to say, see, it wasn't all Wentz. But the caller also said himself, look, Wentz has played horrible this year. So that caller was a little bit more balanced than the general population. And the problem is that there's an extreme other side of that coin who are so intent on trying to prove to people that Wentz played poorly and that Wentz is responsible for his own actions. So they want Hurts to play well to say, see, Wentz has to play better or this team could have done better. And the problem is both are correct. Wentz played bad and the situation is bad. It's not one or the other. And that's the problem with these arguments. There are people who can't accept both. They can't accept that it's both. And there's so many times when we talk about Howie Roseman or Doug Pederson or Wentz or Hurts or Schwartz or any of these guys that people want to just pick one guy. There's no boogeyman here. There's no ultimate super villain like in a movie or something, okay? This isn't a doggone comic book, people. Everybody is responsible for their own actions. If Doug makes a bad call, that's on Doug. If Wentz throws an interception, that's on Wentz. If Hurts fumbles the ball, that's on Hurts. All those things can coexist.
I agree with you. I absolutely do. I think that there's a lot of issues. And I do think, though, when it gets to this level and when it gets to this point where it is so abysmal that you just have to keep moving up the chain until it gets to the very top because it snowballs somewhere. There is a domino effect that begins at some point. And I guess that's Jeffrey Lurie, and then it would be Howie Roseman, and it would be everybody else involved at the top. But when it gets to this level of ugliness, I think it's only fair to start climbing up the chain and say, okay, where does this begin? And the answer is Jeffrey Lurie, and that's why he's going to have a lot on his plate, and we need to trust him to make the proper decisions moving forward for this season.
Trust. That's a very strange thing to say about the situation with anything, but
which is wild because we're not used to this. This is not something that's common here in Philadelphia, right? With this Eagles team, yeah, they just won their first championship, but we are not used to 4-win seasons. This is not what you get from this organization. So it is funny how we have shifted so quickly to how can we possibly trust this organization when statistically, the Eagles have had success without winning the title, but meaningful football for long periods of time. How did it change so quickly?
He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Hennig, filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up next, the football scientist, NFL insider KC Joyner. Deep insight into why the Eagles lost to the Cowboys. How do you go by having that lead you do and be outscored 34-3 after Fletcher Cox leaves the game? We'll ask KC Joyner that coming up next. I want to remind you about my friends over at weightliftinghq.com. Listen, 2021 is just around the corner. Literally, it's just days away. So whatever your fitness goals are for 2021, or maybe you're someone who just wants to supplement your gym routine. Maybe you can't get to the gym a couple days a week because of your job or kids or whatever your situation is. You want to be able to work out from home. Well, with weightliftinghq.com, you can do just that. Weightliftinghq.com is a company located right here in South Jersey. They operate fully online. And whether you want bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, resistance bands, or any other fitness type of equipment, weightliftinghq.com can't just get you that equipment. They will deliver it to your home and help you set it up at home so you're not stuck looking at some crazy diagram trying to figure out which bolt goes where on that doggone bench press. No, they help you set it up, and only with weightliftinghq.com you get that kind of great customer service and incredibly competitive prices. Check them out online at weightliftinghq.com and use the code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's RADIO10 at checkout for weightliftinghq.com. That's weightliftinghq.com. More Eagles and NFL talk next here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
The football scientist KC Joyner joins us. One thought on every game. Before we get to that, we got to get his perspective on the Eagles' loss to the Cowboys. The Philadelphia Eagles are officially, finally done in the playoff hunt at 4-10-1. Casey, how you doing?
Probably a little better than the Eagles are, but, as I saw some people say, maybe it's probably a good thing that their season ended because they weren't going to go very far in the playoffs, even if they did get there. Maybe it's just good to know that they got to start over.
Casey, once Fletcher Cox left the game, the team was outscored 34-3. So explain to the audience a little bit how one player can have that drastic impact on a game when his name, people think of Aaron Donald as the best defensive lineman in the league, but Fletcher Cox maybe like a notch or two below that. So how can one guy disrupt the team that much?
It can do it because in the running game, if you don't disrupt the other team's ground attack, they can just keep running all day long. I've done a lot of studies on this over the years, and you have to disrupt the other team's rushing attack. You can't just hope you're shedding tackles and have safeties come up to make tackles. No, you've got to defeat them, and he's the guy who defeats blocks in the middle. And when he goes out, you just now have to do things with your defense to say, okay, if we're going to stop the run, and mind you, 151 yards on the ground, they probably didn't stop the run, although Dallas wasn't quite as good as that number would suggest, but 34 carries, you're not stopping the run properly, and you're having to do things with your defense to make up for that, and plus whatever he gets in the passing game too. So it's just a loss you're really tough to overcome.
What did you see from Doug Pederson yesterday, and did it change your opinion on if you think he should stay or not?
I see the same offensive creativity. It's just, I don't know. He's the head coach. You got to hold him responsible. But the entire secondary fell apart. It wasn't just the backups. You had Roby giving up a big play. You had Slay giving up a big play. I know he made the pick too. It was a great play for the pick. But they all were giving up big plays, and the tackling on defense was just atrocious. It was especially in the secondary. So I don't know that you have to let your head coach go because of that. But that was the big problem. Because offensively, look, I know they had 3 turnovers, but still, you like the production what you're seeing across the board there. And defensively, they just they need to get better cornerbacks, and maybe they need to go back to their safety-centric approach they did before this year because they tried a cornerback-centric approach this year, and it ain't working.
Now, with that being said, about Pederson, just to follow up on that, we've seen guys who have won Super Bowls, like John Harbaugh and Sean Payton, have down years, and then they bounce back. Can Doug Pederson bounce back? Because, let's be realistic, he had 3 straight playoff appearances, but on each end, 2020 and 2016, no playoffs.
You don't give up on a good coach after one bad year. If I remember something that Bud Grant said years ago, he had a kicker, and his kicker named Fred Cox, and Fred Cox would have a bad game or two or something of that nature, and people would say, oh, you need to get a new kicker. And he was like, well, if I've got a good kicker and he has a bad day, I'm not going to give up on him because I know he's a good kicker. Cox was one of the greatest kickers in the 1970s, so it was a good move on Grant's part. But that's the idea with coaches, too. If you know the coach is not coaching well, then it's one thing. But with this team, okay, with Hurts and things, I see creatively, offensively, where I think they can go with that, and that's fantastic. They just need changes on defense, and I think they just need better personnel because defense is all about personnel. You can't coach away at a bad personnel situation. So I see this more as a personnel situation than I do a coaching situation.
What stood out to you specifically in Jalen Hurts' game? Because yesterday was the first time we saw him, struggle to a bigger degree.
Isn't it incredible, though? We say struggle to a bigger degree, and I totally agree. He has the 2 interceptions. He loses the fumble. But he threw for 342 yards. The guy was still going around and making plays on the run. It's something that you don't want to base your offense around that. But that was something that had been missing with the Eagles' offense, to where if a play broke down, if it was a scramble play, you just didn't expect Wentz to do anything. It just wasn't going to happen. On the pass to Jackson, he had a scramble. That was one of the big plays there. I think you remember in the third quarter, I think he had another scramble play where he had like a 40-yard gain. I think it was to Watkins. So there were that type of offense to where if a play calls something and it doesn't work, that you can go create on the run. That's a rare talent that Hurts has that only 5 quarterbacks, maybe 8 quarterbacks in the league have to something of a similar degree, and that adds a level of dangerousness to this offense that I think will come in handy down the road.
Football scientist KC Joyner joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Follow on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS for all your NFL and fantasy football news and information. Casey, one of the questions about Hurts as well is that you have one camp of people who are saying he's making some of these mistakes because he's a rookie, he didn't have an off season, and he's new and he's learning the NFL game. And you have another group of people who say Wentz made the same mistakes. Why are we giving this guy so much rope? So, where do we draw the line to say that's a rookie mistake versus that's a bad football mistake?
He's got that. What is this? This is his third start. I mean, in his third start, he's making a mistake. And mind you, third start on the one interception where I believe he's in the fourth quarter. He's scrambling to his left. The pass rush is coming. He kind of throws across his body and it goes into coverage. There's somebody sitting in the middle of the zone, and they get the pick in the end zone, and it kills that drive. Okay, the Eagles are down late. They're trying to do something. He tries to make a play he shouldn't make. It was on third down, though, so, I mean, you could come back and get fourth down maybe, but it's a play like that where it's like if that's all it is under very extreme duress situations, he's making a mistake like that, and he's a rookie in his third start doing it, you can coach him out of it. With Wentz, it had been years, and he was making mistakes much earlier in games, and actually in worse situations. He's throwing into double coverages and such. He's not even trying to throw into the obvious double coverages. The level of errors and the frequency of them when they happened and how much Wentz had before yesterday's or before he got benched, all those things factors together just says, look, give Hurts the same amount of time that you gave Wentz before you give up on him.
Coming into the season, getting that explosive wide receiver was the conversation, so the Eagles went out and drafted Jalen Reagor. Well, it is fair to say it's been very underwhelming, and there's times where he just seems off with the route running, with the body language, with the physicality, with the speed, and that was one of the big conversations about him specifically. So how do you assess his play to this point?
He's like most – we've gotten to the point now of the last couple, 3 years where we see – Justin Jefferson, and we see some rookie wide receivers come into the league, and they dominate as rookies. We all need to remember that prior to some of these players who are able to do this, most wide receivers, and they say it's in fantasy football, you get the year 2 or year 3 breakout. Most wide receivers are going to take until that year 3 to get their true breakout. They're going to struggle. Like even Jerry Rice in his rookie season was just a good receiver and nothing more, and then year 2 it really kicked in from. So I look at rookie receivers generally and say, all right, I want to see how they're going to progress over the course of a couple 3 years before I throw on the talent. I mean, he hasn't performed well this year, and he hasn't been able to get the verticality going, but he's also had all the issues with the offense in general. So I want to give him more time than just the one season before I say that he's a bust.
Now, Casey, this means the Eagles are done with the playoffs, but they're in the most ridiculous situation because their game with Washington has been flexed into Sunday Night Football. So this is the most unimportant game of the franchise's season. Yet they can knock Washington out, but they have nothing to play for. So what do you expect, or what are you watching for from the Eagles versus Washington here on Monday? Because we know Washington, Terry McLaurin's in a walking boot. Dwayne Haskins was cut by the team. I mean, this Washington team has their own set of mess to deal with.
They do. If I'm the Eagles, though, I mean, I remember there's a famous story about Vince Lombardi back in the 60s. There was a season-ending game. His team had already clinched everything it could clinch. It was a meaningless game. They played the Rams and out on the West Coast, and everybody thought that they were just going to throw in the towel. And Lombardi pitched this team, and look, you're professionals. Play this game because you're pros and because this is what we do. You're supposed to play this well. They barely lost the game against an L.A. team that won like 12 games that year. Point is that you always want to play to that level if you can. And if you're the Eagles, you got to look at this as saying, now, we got a Washington team we know is going to be motivated. We need to get, Hurts, here's game number 4. We can get some productivity out of him. We can, maybe coach him some of these errors out of him. We get another game we can look at him. We can get stuff out of Reagor. We can get development time for a lot of these players. We might even get development time for some of the other players in the roster and check some of these guys out too and see, hey, we can get them live game time to see what we have on the roster. So there's plenty of opportunities to learn from this contest. I don't think the Eagles just need to mail it in. I think they need to try and go out and win and see and go all out and give these guys a chance to see what they can show.
All right, KC Joyner, one thought on every game. It was a busy football weekend, so we're going to try to get to all of it right now. One thought on every game with KC Joyner. KC, New Orleans, thanks to Alvin Kamara, goes out and crushes Minnesota. But are the Saints really still a favorite? I mean, Minnesota's not really a good team right now.
Zimmer said that might be the worst. In fact, he said it was the worst defense I've ever had, and that's something from Zimmer. He's had some really good defenses, but I still wonder why they didn't give Kamara a chance to get 7 touchdowns, set the record. But the Saints showing that they could do that to still a Minnesota team. Minnesota puts up 33 points. It's not even close. Shows you where the Saints' offense is right now.
Saturday started with the Bucs absolutely crushing the Lions. But is this Tampa waking up, or is this an aberration because Detroit's Detroit?
Detroit had the worst defense in the league coming into this weekend from that game, and maybe Minnesota might be worse, but Detroit was the worst defense in the league coming into this weekend, and Tampa would have crushed them even if Detroit would have had their coaching staff. I think it says a lot for where Tampa is, but it probably says more for where Detroit is.
the running back whisperer Kyle Shanahan goes back to Arizona and takes Arizona out of the playoffs. Potentially, the Cardinals are hanging on by a thread, Casey, after losing 20-12.
San Francisco is such a well-coached team. They've had all kinds of issues this year with injuries, and they had turnovers in every game, 2 turnovers for every game since week 4. So they've had a lot of things that will be correctable for next year, but they're such a well-coached team. In Arizona, they're seeming to wear down the stretch, and that was what I worried about them, is that they build a team that could go 16 games, and I don't think that they have.
It looked like Vegas was on their way to staying in the playoff hunt, but then Fitzmagic comes in, gets a face mask, makes the pass, and the Dolphins win by 1 point.
Brian Flores, Coach of the Year, been saying it for a while. I know there's a lot of other candidates, but he is definitely Coach of the Year. Although, why are you waiting that long to put Fitzmagic in, and why aren't you starting Fitzmagic in Week 17? I'm not sure why that's the case, but hey, he found a way still to get it done. Dolphins look like a team that's going to be real hard out in the playoffs.
If I would have told you that Matt Ryan outplayed Patrick Mahomes, you would have thought Atlanta would have won, but Kansas City wins by a field goal.
Atlanta always finds a way to lose. Young Hui Koo, he's one of the best kickers in the league, probably a Pro Bowl kicker, maybe an All-Pro kicker. He misses a makeable kick to send the thing to overtime. And Kansas City, though, they're winning a bunch of games of late, but they're winning them by 1 possession with 6 points, 4 points, 3 points, very, very close contest. That's the kind of thing you don't expect to win 3 straight in the playoffs that way. So Kansas City needs to find a way to change their dynamic, because right now they're going to get upset in the playoffs if they don't watch it.
The Jets win another game, and Cleveland abandoned the run game. Why, Casey?
I think because the Jets set up a defense that said we're going to play the run game. You're missing 4 receivers. Marvin Hall's your best receiver, and you're going to go with just tight ends, and that's what you're going to do. So we're going to make you throw the football, and Cleveland had to do it, and Mayfield got 285, but it wasn't anywhere near enough. So the Browns, with that COVID situation, they gave the Jets the key to beating them.
The Colts had a huge lead at halftime. They dominated the Steelers in the first half, but Big Ben somehow gets the Steelers to win the game in the end.
He does. Marquise Pouncey evidently told the team at halftime, we don't look like we're not having fun out there, and the Steelers look like they haven't been having fun for 3.5 weeks. They're the most unmotivated team in the league, and now they go out there and they look like they're motivated in the second half, and then they come back to win. Maybe that was the turning point of their season, because they still have enough talent to go to the Super Bowl.
Mitch Trubisky, another win. I think it's, 5 straight games they've scored 30 points for the first time, 40 or 50 years for the Bears? What is going on in Chicago?
Trubisky realized that his career might be over and that he was going to be a career backup after this, after he got benched, and now he's getting a second chance. And people are even talking right now, okay, should Trubisky be the long-term quarterback in Chicago? Not sure that that's the case, but Jacksonville is by far the worst team in the league. And Trubisky keeps playing like this, maybe you just need to threaten to bench him every few games. You can keep him around for a while.
Baltimore goes up to New York, beats the Giants, and you know what? It wasn't the prettiest win, but Baltimore got back to their bread and butter. That's the rush game, almost 250 rushing yards.
They're the best running team in the league, especially when they put their mind to it. And if you can't get them out of that mode, they're really tough to beat. And the Giants' offense, as bad as it is right now, they were never going to get Baltimore out of that mode.
Probably one of the most exciting games of Sunday was the Bengals beating the Texans. And after the game, J.J. Watt, he was ripping into his teammates.
He was. That organization is dysfunctional right now. You read about what's happening with upper management and such, and also they've had the coaching staff and all the changes they had. And you think of J.J. Watt knowing he's near the end of a Hall of Fame career, and this is what he's having to go through. I think he wants to get out of Houston, and he's going to do whatever he has to do it. But give the Texans credit for fighting a Bengals team that, hey, it looks like the last couple of weeks they're a different team than they were a few weeks before. This is got some talented club.
It wasn't a pretty win, but Justin Herbert outplays Drew Lock and helps the Chargers get a win.
If I'm the Broncos, I'm wondering what I got in Lock. I know that there's a certain level that you can get to, but I'm wondering if this season is showing us his ceiling. And it's not an ideal situation for him, but I don't know that he is the next level quarterback that people thought he was at the end of last year, and obviously Herbert is.
KC Joyner, the football scientist, one thought on every game as we run through NFL Week 16. The Panthers beat Washington. Washington was down to Taylor Heineke at quarterback. Meanwhile, Carolina beats their former coach.
They do, and Washington looks like you got to give Rivera a lot of credit. That's a dysfunctional situation in a lot of ways, and he brought a lot of stability to it. But you can't have the quarterback problems that they have. They had to have Smith under center to be able to be the type of team that they want to be, and as long as he's not there, they've got problems. So, and even if he's out there next week, he's not healthy, they're still going to have problems because as he goes is how that team goes.
Second straight week, the Rams' offense struggles, this time against Seattle. Jamal Adams is celebrating, but should Ram fans be worried?
They should be. It looks like Goff's got a broken thumb. At least that was the reports that were out earlier today, that he might have had a broken thumb, and it obviously looked like he was off for a lot of that game once he hit that thumb. So, and then if their backup isn't up to par, and that offense is not good, I don't think the Rams make the playoffs this year.
Sunday football supposed to be a huge matchup of the two playoff teams, but the Packers didn't just outclass Titans. They won the time of possession by over 13 minutes, Casey.
They did, and the thing is the Titans, they need you to play 4 quarters of stopping Derrick Henry. If you do that, he's going to wear you down. The Packers, through being able to stop the run early and being able to hit some big plays in the passing game, were able to get enough of a lead to where they only had to stop Henry for about a quarter and a half, and that's a heck of a lot easier than just stopping him for 4 quarters, and that made all the difference, and then Green Bay could just play the type of power-running game it wants to play, so kudos to them for that game plan.
Monday Night Football here on 97.3 ESPN. Patriots are officially eliminated from the playoffs. And the Bills, they are looking pretty, but this is the first game in Gillette Field history that the Patriots are not playoff contenders, Casey.
Yeah, well, I don't feel necessarily bad for Patriots fans. You guys got all those Super Bowls to remember no matter what happens this year or in the future. But give the Bills credit for their offense is playing at a much different level. And the Patriots they're such a limited team. I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep the game close just because it's Belichick and he's such a great play caller and things. But the Bills are playing at the talent level differences between their offense and the Patriots offense is so dramatic. I'd be shocked if the Patriots could keep it within 10.
Real quick, Casey, I'm going to make you pick. If you had to pick, which team would you rather put your money behind? Is it Buffalo or Miami right now?
It's Buffalo just because where their offense is. With Miami with Tua out there, their offense just isn't dynamic in the way that Buffalo's offense can be multiply dynamic with a bunch of different players. So I would have to take it from that reason. But having said that, I mean, Miami's got, I think, better defensive play calling, and they can get turnovers. If they could get in the Buffalo and win a turnover battle, they got a shot. But if it's just on straight talent, I got to take Buffalo because of their offense.
He is KC Joyner. Follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS for all your fantasy football, DFS, NFL Inside. He does great film work. You can catch all of his work right there at KC Joyner TFS. Casey, thanks so much. I hope you had a great holiday weekend.
You too. Appreciate it.
Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And speaking of Monday Night Football, you have a chance to make some big money on Monday Night Football thanks to FanDuel. So here's how this works. My friends at FanDuel, they are doing something really cool tonight. So for Buffalo and New England, they're facing off in the Monday Night Showdown, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win even bigger bet with the game. Here's how it works. For every 2,500 fans who bet Buffalo to cover the spread, they'll keep moving the line 1 point in Buffalo's favor. And when you finish betting, at the end of the night, you'll get paid off at not what you bet at, but what the line finished at. So, for example, if a team opens at +8 and they can end up at +59.5, you get paid at that +59.5. So don't wait. Tell everybody, get on the FanDuel. You want to sign up and get in on the spread the love market with your bet. If you're new to FanDuel, here's your chance to start betting on FanDuel with incredible odds. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app and be sure to sign up with the code Hennig. That's FanDuel Sportsbook with the promo code HENNIG right now at FanDuel. You do not want to miss out on this crazy deal for you to get some huge, massive odds with FanDuel Sportsbook. That's FanDuel Sportsbook, promo code HENNIG to get in on this crazy deal. You can bet all the way up to kickoff, and you can get in on the odds with this great deal. And the great thing about FanDuel is that unlike some sportsbooks where their app looks like it's about 20 years old, or other sportsbooks where they don't care about if you are a returning customer, they only care about new customers, FanDuel has a great app. It's modern, it's fast, it's easy to use, and it's not going to be slow, and they still care about you whether you're a new or existing customer. That's FanDuel Sportsbook. That's promo code Hennig, HENNIG, to get in on Monday Football tonight. You hear all the action. Coverage begins at 7:30 here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig, Hunter Brody, wrap up the show. Coming up next, You got a little Sixers news over there.
Yeah, we got a little bit of Sixers news and some Phillies news. We'll start with the 76ers. Team officials confirm that Furkan Korkmaz has suffered a left adductor strain and will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. Now, normally that means nothing to me because I'm not big on Furkan Korkmaz, but knowing he's the second guy off the bench, and, well, it's a mix between him, Shake, and Dwight Howard, but, you know, he comes off the bench very early and he gets some minutes with this team, so that's a loss in terms of spacing the floor.
So it'll be out, what, 2 weeks?
Well, we're talking about the 76ers here, Josh.
Well, that was Brett Brown. This is Doc Rivers.
Oh, don't
even
do that to me. It's going to be the same. But, yeah, look, it's
I
a
couldn't
loss.
resist.
I'm with you. But for a team that's trying to learn who they are with a new coach and a new scheme and this and that, I think losing Furkan definitely hurts. And maybe this is Matisse Thybulle's opportunity and Tyrese Maxey to grab more minutes.
I would hope so.
Definitely.
I would hope that Matisse can take an opportunity to really try to show his value to this team, because I think he could be a serious, valuable contributor. And honestly, the way they played last night against the Cavs, maybe a little more Matisse isn't a bad thing.
I'm stuck in torn with Matisse because I think that his flaw offensively is so brutal and hurts so much that you're so limited in how long you can possibly play him for. And I don't know if he came back with enough extra added to the offensive side of the game. Now, I'm sure some are saying, well, Ben Simmons does it just fine. Yeah, well, Ben Simmons is 6'10" and is a totally different player than Matisse Thybulle. So it's not the same at all, even though they both have flaws in their offensive game. Ben can't shoot, and he averages 17 points per game. Matisse Thybulle can't shoot and doesn't even take shots when he's out there. Huge difference. Monstrous difference. But I'm with you that I think he has a skill set that can be utilized more for sure.
One thing I'm confused with the Sixers is Doc Rivers said he wanted to have the number one defensive team in the league. And I've only seen that team show up for one of the 3 games. So to me, this might be an opportunity for Doc to maybe get back to basics. You know what I mean?
Sure. And I think yesterday, though, not having a rim protector in Embiid and the way that they're working the new pick-and-roll defense where they're moving the big guy up, a lot played a role in I think, the poor defensive efforts. But I'm with you. You stated you want to have that number one defense. You weren't even close. And Embiid or no Embiid, it has to look better than that.
Yeah, you got to at least go out there and just crush teams like the Cavs defensively. Maybe you don't play well offensively, but you at least got to show the effort on the other end of the court.
Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but this Cavs team's 3-0. Is this Cavs team not a dumpster fire, or was that just a really bad showing by the Sixers, or was it a combination of both? They're 3-0. Sexton seems to be growing into something a bit, and look, they don't have they're not anywhere close to, I'm talking, NBA title playoff type run, but we're so used to them being the bottom of the bottom that loses 60 games a season.
But Sexton feels a little bit like Zach LaVine. Like he's that really good player. Maybe you didn't realize how good he could be.
Right, I'm with you on that for sure. But I'm just saying, look, they're 3-0 at this point. Are we not giving the other team enough credit for them showing up and playing hard and knocking down their shots? You know?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what this team does tomorrow night.
For sure. It's a statement. Now, I have some Phillies news from about an hour ago. You want to hear this? It's from John Heyman.
Okay.
All right. JT Realmuto remains the priority for the Phillies with the new regime. They have an offer out on him, but like with other big free agents, it might be a waiting game. So it's not anything crazy, but I didn't know where they stood with JT Realmuto. Now, there's an offer on the table. Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? Is it an average one? We don't know. But I do know that James McCann is no longer available. We do know that the Mets are out on a catcher, and some of these other teams that were willing to go out for JT are no longer in play. There might be something to this when it comes to him returning.
There's also something to the fact that the guy in charge now is Dombrowski and not the Clintack McPhail contingent. Because how many times did Clintack get asked about JT Realmuto, and he gave the strangest answers, right? Every answer was just like, what? Like the explanation he had about why they didn't want to give him a contract in season, waiting for after the season, you were just like, who? What am I listening to?
Isn't it crazy that the Phillies prior to the Dombrowski hire, so the last 5 years or so with Matt Clintack and McPhail, we think Doug Pederson's bad at pressers, and he is. I mean, he is garbage. The Phillies are at least 10 times worse.
Right.
Let that settle in. It was awful. So it's so refreshing. Even though I have some red flags that go up with Dombrowski, it's so refreshing to hear someone who is a professional at his job speak baseball.
Yeah, I feel like when you look at this organization, you just feel better. You have a little more hope about the team moving forward now that Dombrowski is there compared to Klintak.
Oh, no doubt about it. So we'll see how that all shapes up. But I do want to bring up tonight's game. How are you feeling? Do you think that the New England Patriots get a victory? Is Buffalo just going to steamroll them? How do you see this game playing out?
I think it'll be close for a while just because of the fact that, like Casey said, it's Belichick, it's the Patriots, you know what I mean? I would actually go as far to say this. People are wondering about the point spread, right?
I was just about to look it up because it's 7.
I would stay away from the point spread. You know where I would go? The over-under.
47.
That 47 feels a little high. I might jump on the under on that.
You like the under?
I like the under.
Now, you've been pretty solid, except for yesterday, right? You've had some nice moments.
Well, I didn't give out any picks yesterday, so that doesn't count.
Just personal for you.
Personally, I had a good Saturday and a one big swing and a miss on Sunday.
Because of a parlay, though.
Because of the Eagles.
Right, but you hit on everything you selected except for the Eagles in your parlay. So you had strong assessment. You just failed on one game.
Right, and I probably let my emotions get in the way of that situation. And you learn and learn. You live and learn.
I think heading into the game, though, to think the Eagles, and plus it was a teaser. It wasn't just a parlay. So you had them at +3. Am I correct?
I think it was +4.
Okay. You tell me in that game before it all happened and before we saw the results, I don't think you just let the emotions get the best of you. I thought you made an educated decision. It just didn't work out that way.
Yeah, it happens.
So you're staying away from the Patriots +7 and you're going the under on 47.
Yes.
I
feel way more comfortable.
Okay.
Because I feel like it was 24-17.
So I'm going to take this, and then we'll attack this again on Wednesday and see if you made me money or not. My dog's either going to eat or not eat based off of your pick tonight. So be prepared on the damage that could be done for Wednesday.
Fine.
That's a lot of pressure, Josh. You still feel confident?
Sure.
All righty.
24 + 17 is 41, right?
Good math.
He's Hunter Brody. He has the day off tomorrow. He won't know what to do with himself because the Sixers are on tomorrow night. I'm Josh Hennig. I'll be in tomorrow with Deshaun Hendricks. Hunter will be back on Wednesday here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Bills Patriots coverage begins at 7:30 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Have a great night.